Chapter 92. On Langga's side, a few people were trying to attract attention. Xiao Xian felt the gaze in front of him stare at him for about 2 minutes before moving away. "Xian, run!" Lang Jie shouted from the side. There was no need for Lang Jie to shout. Xiao Xian had already sensed that the other party had moved away from him. His legs gathered strength in an instant, and his bent knees shot out. Crack! The stone pillar under his feet suddenly cracked, and Xiao Xian's body shot out like an arrow. The moment Xiao Xian left the stone pillar, he caught a glimpse of a long shadow shooting out and then retreating quickly from the corner of his eye. If Xiao Xian had been a little slower, he might have been swept by that long shadow. Xiao Xian knew what that long shadow was. If he was touched by it, he would be directly dragged into the water. At the same time, Lang Jie and the others had already thrown the spears in their hands at the creature in the water. They didn't dare to directly throw the spears earlier because Xiao Xian's position could easily injure him. Now that Xiao Xian had left, they didn't have to be restrained. The muscles on their arms bulged as they threw the spears in their hands. The stone spears pierced through the curtain of rain. Xiao Xian could still hear the whooshing sound of the spears as they flew through the air. Puff, puff, puff. 3 spears pierced the body of the creature in the water, and red blood flowed out. If the piranhas were here, they would have followed the smell and come over to snatch it. But now, other than the struggling of the creature that had been shot, there was nothing else. Whooshing! Another 2 spears were thrown. Long straw ropes were tied to the spears. Obviously, they were used to drag the prey that had just been shot to the shore. As the people on the shore retracted the straw ropes, Xiao Xian finally saw the figure of the creature. It was a little different from what he had imagined. The creature that had been dragged to the shore did indeed look like a frog, but what was more obvious was that it had a long tail behind it. A tadpole? A tadpole that had not yet developed into a frog but had grown both front and rear limbs? Xiao Xian didn't expect to see something like this when he heard the screams just now. The long-tailed frog that was shot was still struggling, but its struggle was a little weaker than before. Its forelimbs and back legs were kicking, leaving marks on the riverbank. After the long-tailed frog was stabbed a few more times and stopped struggling, Xiao Xian took a closer look. In addition to its long tail, its limbs were webbed instead of toes. Opening its mouth, there were some sharp teeth in its mouth. Other than that, it looked exactly like a fully transformed frog. Not only that, but the size of this long-tailed frog also made Xiao Xian speechless. Not counting its long tail, its body length was already more than 5 meters long. No wonder Lang Jie and the others were so nervous. It was Xiao Xian's first time seeing such a big frog with fangs and a long tail. "I was almost scared to death just now." Seeing that Xiao Xian was safe and sound, Lang Jie let out a long sigh of relief. Then he warned Xiao Xian, "This thing came out. You have to be careful from now on. It's best not to go to the fish fence for the next few days." Whether or not they could catch fish was a small matter. Their safety was the most important thing. Lang Jie still had a lingering fear. He didn't expect the thing in the water to come out so soon. When he saw the 2 round eyes peeking out of the water very close to Xiao Xian, Lang Jie felt as if a basin of cold water had been splashed on his face. Some of the people who had been on patrol had been swept into the water. Those who had been pulled into the river never came back. Although everyone had taken precautions and hunted many of these things every year, they still fell into the trap if they were not careful. In front of the prey, they couldn't be careless. Watching the others slaughter the long-tailed frog, Lang Jie told Xiao Xian some things he needed to pay attention to. He also told Xiao Xian about some previous tragedies, in order to attract Xiao Xian's attention. "As for this thing, it's not bad to eat. We can still hunt some now, but in 2 days, it will be difficult to do so," Lang Jie said. On the same day, Xiao Xian hunted 3 long-tailed frogs with Lang Jie and the others. Except for the different patterns on the surface of the skin, these 3 frogs were all strange species with large fangs and long tails. The people on patrol shared some of the frogs and brought them back after the patrol. It was not bad to eat. Although it was not as tender as the frog meat that Xiao Xian had eaten in his previous life, it contained more energy than snail meat. The rainy season here was relatively short compared to winter, but it was not a matter of 1 or 2 days. It was about 30 days. No one could tell the exact time, because it was different every year. 2 days later, because of the incessant rain, the river level rose a lot. Xiao Xian thought that at this rate, it would take less than 10 days to cross the stone line, but the others didn't seem worried at all. When Xiao Xian came to the riverbank to patrol, From the shallow water to the deeper areas, he could see a lot of slightly triangular heads and round eyes along the riverbank, densely packed. No wonder Lang Jie said that it was difficult to hunt. There were so many long-tailed frogs. Before you could pull the frogs ashore, the straw rope would be pulled into the river by them. Sometimes when he had nothing to do, Lang Jie would stuff mud into the shell of a snail and then throw it over, watching the long-tailed frogs shoot out their long tongues to snatch the food. Like the frogs that Xueqi knew, the long-tailed frogs also caught moving things. Many times, the snails thrown over were swept away by their long tongues before they fell into the water. Those long-tailed frogs never went ashore. At most, they would lie down in the shallow water, showing their triangular heads and a pair of round eyes. They also rarely croaked, unlike Xueqi's imagination. Occasionally, he would hear a small and short guab sound. As the river level rose, every day when Xueqi went over, the patrol would retreat. Because of the existence of the long-tailed frogs, they had to keep a safe distance from the river. Until one day when Xueqi came to the riverbank, he found that the long-tailed frogs lying near the riverbank had all disappeared, and the river level, which had risen to the 7th fish fence, had begun to recede. The rainy season was not over. Lang Jie told Xueqi that this was only the first time the river level had receded in the rainy season, and there would be a few more times of receding. After the first receding, all the long-tailed frogs would disappear, and there would be no need to worry about them appearing again. At the same time, Xueqi also noticed that when the river level receded, the river flow, which had gradually become obvious because of the rising water during the rainy season, had changed. Now the river did not flow in the direction where the river overlord swam, but upstream, as Xueqi guessed. The change in the river flow, and the disappearance of the long-tailed frogs overnight, all told Xueqi that something had happened upstream. According to Lang Jie, the river level would recede several times during the rainy season, and every time the river level receded, the river flow would change. Every year during the rainy season, there were many things that they did not know about. Because of these strange phenomena, the people in the tribe felt that this boundless river was even more mysterious. They were not willing to explore it, and did not dare to explore it. When the river level receded for the first time, Xueqi saw the wood-eating insect in the 7th fish fence. The 7th fish fence was set up by Xueqi. He put a few pieces of wood in the fence, but he did not expect that the river level would recede, and the wood-eating insect would be trapped inside temporarily. The wood-eating insect was like a mass of thick mucus. When it smelled the existence of wood, it would stick to the wood, or directly grow, and then pull the wood down. However, Xueqi found that there were many trees in the flooded areas, and those trees were not eaten much. If a small piece of wood was thrown into the river, it would be pulled down after more than an hour. Normally, it would not take more than 2 minutes for the floating wood to disappear. Obviously, the wood-eating insect's activities were also very abnormal during the rainy season. Therefore, Xueqi would put a piece of wood in the water every day when he was patrolling, to see how long it would take for it to be pulled down. A thin straw rope was tied to the wood, and the other end of the rope was tied to the stone pillar, so that it would not float away. After returning, Xueqi would record the results of the day in his secret notebook. This rainy season only lasted for 27 days, which was a few days shorter than last year. This was a normal phenomenon. According to the old warriors, the longest rainy season they had experienced was 40 days, but the shortest rainy season was no less than 25 days. When the rain stopped, the lingering dark clouds in the sky dispersed, and the long-awaited sun shone on the land once again. Everyone in the tribe felt as sunny as the weather. The children who had been cooped up in the house for nearly 30 days ran out happily, and ran around barefoot, laughing loudly. The children in the cave also began to prepare things. The rainy season was over, and they could continue to fish. For the time being, they did not have to worry about being dazed by the roars from the river. Why was it temporary? Because the river monsters that had stopped roaring would appear again after a while, and roar again. "Xian, let's go back." Lang Jie and the others had already packed up and were ready to leave. "I'll go back right away. You guys go first." Xueqi responded. After the rainy season, as long as they did not go into the water, they would not be in danger, so Lang Jie was not worried. After Lang Jie and the others left, Xueqi took out a wooden boat from the animal skin bag. This was a simple sailboat he made in the last few days of patrolling, with the wood and some small stone nails he stored in the house every day after returning home. The sail was only made of the leaves of a kind of plant, and the planks were also ordinary wood. The hull of the sailboat was only 2 palms long. The wind blew from the river bank to the river. Xian put the simple sailboat on the river, and with a little force from his fingers, the hull was pushed away. It swayed and was blown away by the wind, away from the shoal of the river bank, to the place where the boundary could not be seen. The green on the boat was particularly conspicuous. There were a lot of piranhas in the river. These big-headed low IQ guys that had disappeared for a rainy season began to be active again. Even more active than before the rainy season. Throwing a small piece of bloody meat into the river could cause them to fight for a long time, and they were very energetic. The good thing was that they were not interested in wood, and the wood-eating insects in the river that were interested in would seem to have disappeared. Standing by the river and watching for a while, Xian carried his things and left. When he went up the mountain, he looked back at the river, and could see the little dot below Yongguang gradually drifting away. Well, that's it for tonight. I'll continue tomorrow. Good night, everyone. Chapter 93. After the end of the rainy season, it was Ta's hunting team's turn to go hunting. This time, Xian followed Mai's hunting team to the mountaintop. When they gathered to sing the hunting song, Ta did not say anything when he saw Xian. He just looked a little unhappy, but he did not dare to show it. It seemed that the shaman had talked to him, so he did not dare to say anything. Even if he had any thoughts, he had to keep them to himself. If he showed it, it would be disrespectful to the shaman. Ta also held his breath. He thought that even without Xian, they could still get more plants. Even if they needed to set traps, could no one in the advance group know how to do that? Did the ancestors only protect Xian, but not the elites in the tribe? He did not believe it. The other hunting team members also looked at Xian with curiosity, especially the young warriors. When they looked at Xian, they were obviously gloating. Their eyes seemed to say, "See, I told you. That guy will definitely be kicked out of the advance group." Lang Jie was worried that Xian would think too much, so he kept comforting him on the way up the mountain. However, he did not know that Xian did not care about it at all. He was the one who had suggested it. Caesar and Cha-Cha were left in Old Ka's place. There was still some food left, and they all moved there. There was still some food in the ice cave on the mountaintop, so they would not starve. The hunting time was a little tight this time. As soon as the rainy season was over, Ta quickly gathered the leaders of each hunting team to prepare for the hunting trip. They had to come back before the full moon, because during the full moon, the beasts in the forest would be extremely violent. Therefore, according to past experience, no matter which hunting team went out at this time, they must make sure to come back before the full moon. It would be best if they could come back a few days earlier. Last time, when Xian went hunting with Mai and the others, the hunting team stopped at the second foothold on the hunting route because of the discovery of the ancestors. But this time, the hunting in the first and second footholds went smoothly, and Xian followed them to the third foothold. There were many lakes in the hunting ground of the third foothold. After the rainy season, the water level of the larger lakes rose, and a few smaller lakes appeared in other places. After the rainy season, many wild beasts came out to play, including many ferocious beasts. With the previous hunting experience and the increase in strength, the harvest this time was very rich. Because of the large proportion of high-level prey, the prey brought back this time was enough to last more than 50 days. In the tribe, Old Ku was not as worried as before. After thinking about it, Old Ku concluded that Xian did not say "don't worry" before setting off. And that was the truth. This hunting went very smoothly, and Xian also let go of his responsibilities, assisting, killing, setting traps and so on. He was no longer a walk-on. Xian was very satisfied with the fruitful hunting. The only difference from the previous hunting trips was that as the moon became rounder and rounder at night, the forest at night seemed to be covered with a layer of hazy silver light, and the view was not so dark. But at the same time, the wild beasts and ferocious beasts at night were obviously becoming more and more violent. No matter day or night, they could hear all kinds of wild beasts and ferocious beasts roaring more frequently than before. 20 days later, the hunting team returned to the tribe. In the last few days, because of the frequent attacks of the wild beasts, many people in each hunting group had been injured. Fortunately, they had been prepared for this. Although many people were injured, only 3 people were seriously injured. Compared to the current situation, 3 people were not that serious. Fortunately, no one in Mai's hunting team was seriously injured. When they returned to the tribe, Xian found that the level of the river at the foot of the mountain had decreased a lot. The fish fences were still there. The first fish fence was originally close to the river, and after the end of the rainy season, the rising river level fell back down. Compared with before the rainy season, the river level was only a little higher, and the river water was in contact with the first fish fence. But now, more than 20 days had passed. When they came back, the river level had decreased a lot, even lower than before the rainy season. It's going to be a full moon soon, and the river level will decrease faster in the next few days, Lang Jie said. After thinking for a while, Lang Jie smiled and said, "The fish fences we set didn't catch anything during the rainy season, but after the full moon this time, maybe we will catch something." The strange thing about this world was that the 2 moons in the night sky were only full once a year. At that time, the 2 moons in the night sky would meet, overlap, and then separate again, moving in different directions. The night of the full moon was the time when the 2 moons overlapped. At this time last year, Xueqi, like the other children, spent most of his time in the cave. He didn't get close to the river, so naturally, he didn't see the ebb and flow of the river. This year, there were more people fishing, but when the river level decreased, they were still not allowed to touch the water. Those who were supposed to stay in the cave continued to stay in the cave. After collecting the game, Xueqi led Caesar and Cha-Cha back. They have been a little restless recently. You should pay attention to them, Old Ke said. Xueqi saw the pile of bones next to him. The long bones were bitten into small pieces, and Caesar didn't eat them, so he just threw them there. There were many scratches on the ground made by the wolf's claws. As for Cha-Cha, she was very active before. She wanted to peck at everything she saw. She even used her claws to scratch and Cha-Cha. But recently, she became very quiet and motionless. If she wasn't sleeping, she was just squatting in her nest and didn't go anywhere. After Xueqi returned to the wooden house, he looked at the energetic Caesar and the unusually quiet Cha-Cha. After thinking for a while, he took out his knife and decided to make something. During this hunting trip, the leaves of a tree reminded Xueqi of a small toy. Boomerang, also known as a boomerang, was something that Xueqi used to play with when he was a child. It could be made with paper, but in the tribe, it was better to use wood. Xueqi made a V-shaped boomerang. After becoming proficient in making stone and wood, it wasn't difficult to make a boomerang like this. He was very familiar with it. In less than an hour, Xueqi walked out of the door with the finished product. "Caesar, come out!" Xueqi called out the wolf that was wandering around the house. He patted the wolf's head with the boomerang in his hand and said, "I'll throw it out. You pick it up." When he trained Caesar in the past, Xueqi would sometimes throw out a branch or a bone for Caesar to pick up. So, Caesar was familiar with this. Seeing Caesar's eyes on the boomerang in his hand, Xueqi knew that he was ready. He threw the boomerang in his hand. The boomerang that was thrown out quickly flew away. But soon, it flew in an arc to the left. After a big circle, it flew back to Xueqi. Caesar, who had been chasing after the boomerang, was very puzzled. He didn't understand why the boomerang would come back by itself. When Xueqi threw it out again, he ran after it again. What? Tuo and Xueqi, who came to find Xueqi, were very surprised to see a piece of wood thrown out by Xueqi. The piece of wood made a big circle in the air and came back to Xueqi. "What is this?" Tuo came over and asked curiously. They had gained a lot in this hunting trip. Compared to their previous hunting trips, the quantity was still considerable. But in terms of quality, it was not as good as the green thief and the wind ball. Even though some people in the team had set up traps outside at night, they still didn't gain anything. Some of the traps were even destroyed by unknown forces. He came to find Xueqi to ask if Xueqi wanted to join the advance group again. Unexpectedly, he saw such a novel thing as soon as he arrived. "This is a boomerang," Xueqi said. "Can I have a try?" Tuo was itching to try. "Sure." Xueqi handed the boomerang to Tuo and explained the technique. "Won't it really be thrown away?" Tuo was still unsure. After all, he was used to throwing stone spears and other things. He always felt that this thing would fly far away once it was thrown out. As for flying back, no. Xueqi said affirmatively. "Okay, let me try first." Tuo gave it a try. Seeing that it could really fly back, he was relieved and used more strength for the second time. Xueqi, who was standing next to Tuo, opened his eyes wide without blinking. He saw the piece of wood thrown out by Tuo and then fly back again. He swallowed his saliva and rubbed his palms. Let me do it. When Tuo caught the flying boomerang, Xueqi rushed to grab it. However, the result of his carelessness was that the wooden boomerang was broken before it could be thrown out. Chapter 94. Xueqi was beaten up by Tuo and dragged away. Before they left, Tuo and Xueqi asked Xiao to make 2 boomerangs for them without hesitation. Boomerangs were said to be invented by some aborigines. But here, boomerangs were not very helpful for hunting. Thinking of the ferocious beasts in the forest, they knew that boomerangs could not harm them at all. However, they could also be used to drive away birds and beasts, or as bait to attract the attention of ferocious beasts. Before Tuo left, he asked Xiao whether he would join the advance group again. Xiao did not give a clear answer. He only said that he would think about it when he was more powerful. Tuo and Xiqi's coming here might not have been ordered by Ta, but Ta must have known about it, and he did not stop them. No matter what Ta thought, Xiao did not plan to join the advance group again. He felt more comfortable in Mai's hunting group. Because of Xiao's previous achievements, the shaman would give him the herbs he needed. Xiao gave those herbs to old Ku, who now looked much more energetic than before. When he came to himself, he saw that Caesar was still squatting on the ground, looking at the broken boomerang. Xiao walked over and picked up the broken boomerang. He threw it into the house and made a fire later. He patted Caesar's head to comfort him, and said, I'll make you a new one tomorrow. Probably because of the exercise during the day, Caesar's vigorous energy had decreased a lot. At night, Caesar was a little quieter. Xiao stood at the door, looking at the night sky. The 2 moons, which were almost full, had met. According to the old warriors, the river level would drop faster when the 2 moons met. The change was obvious. The next day, when Xiao came to the river, he saw that the river level had dropped a lot compared to yesterday. The river was also rushing downstream, as if something was sucking it downstream. This indeed confirmed the old warriors' words. They said that when the moon was full, the river would disappear. After the river level dropped, a lot of sand was exposed. Things could be seen moving in the sand. Sometimes, an unknown bird would fly to the sand to peck, but sometimes, a big mouth would jump out from the sand and bite the bird into the sand. Even if there was only sand left, it was still dangerous. No wonder the tribe didn't allow people to get close to that area. Not to mention the fact that the sand could easily sink in. Just the creatures hiding in the sand were enough to scare everyone. In the next few days, the 2 moons overlapped more and more, and the river flowed faster and faster. Now, standing next to the first fish fence, there was nothing but sand in front of their eyes. However, because the river level was falling, they could see the bottom of the river. In addition to the sand, there were also some strange-looking aquatic plants. Some were like corals and some were like ordinary aquatic plants, but they could move on their own. Less than 10 meters from the first fish fence, there was a steep slope. More than 100 meters away, the river was very deep. It even made people feel like they were in a bottomless abyss. A river that allowed the river overlords to live freely must not be an ordinary river. It was just that they didn't know how deep the river was. Before the river disappeared, Xiao would throw a piece of wood into the river and watch the wood flow downstream. Until it was out of their sight, none of the wood would sink. Obviously, some creatures that ate wood were still not in the river. As the time of the 2 moons was getting closer and closer, not only Caesar and Cha-Cha's symptoms were getting more and more obvious, but the night swallow creatures were also getting more and more rampant. Other people couldn't hear the night swallow's sound, but Xiao could. He could hear the night swallow creatures' excitement from their sounds. This bloodthirsty excitement made them overcome their fear of fire. Even if someone walked around at night with a torch, they would be attacked by the night swallow creatures. Many night swallow creatures were burned to death by the fire. However, the night swallow creatures only had eyes for their targets. Caesar would howl like the wolves in the forest these days. Last year, Caesar's symptoms were not as obvious as now, probably because he was still young, so he didn't howl. However, this year was different. At first, the patrolling warriors thought that wolves had entered the tribe, but when they came, they found out that it was Caesar. After all, Caesar didn't howl like that in the tribe before. Cha-Cha now nestled in its nest every day and didn't go anywhere, as if it felt that there was danger outside. If it wasn't for its increasing appetite, Xiao would have thought that it was sick. As for the river at the foot of the mountain, the most intuitive feeling was that the river had gone far away, as if there had never been a river at the foot of the mountain. It had really disappeared, leaving behind only an abyss filled with mud and sand. Looking up, looking into the distance, there was nothing. There was no river, no other shore, and it was impossible to see where the border was. If it wasn't for the old warrior's warning, Xueqi would also have a psychological fear of the unknown because of such a strange phenomenon. On the day when the two moons completely overlapped, the night was as bright as day. After the two moons overlapped, it was as if the two moons had merged into one, becoming much bigger. The full moon in the night sky was like a huge pale eyeball overlooking everything on the ground. That night, Night Swallow danced wildly above the abyss where the river had disappeared, but it didn't fly back into the tribe. On the top of the mountain, the shaman stood beside the fire pit, chanting something. In the fire pit, there was originally a small flame, but now it had filled the entire fire pit. The high flame made the top of the mountain look like a torch, which also reduced the people's fear of such a phenomenon. The tribe was terrifyingly quiet. Except for the shaman on the top of the mountain, no one was standing outside. Xueqi had already been told to stay in the house for the night. Caesar was howling in the house, and Cha-Cha was curled up in its nest, wishing that it could bury its head in its wings. Even in the house, they could hear the vague roars of beasts from far away in the forest. It wasn't until the next day when the moon disappeared and the sun appeared that everyone came out again. Everyone's face showed a sense of relief. Although the full moon night didn't cause any substantial harm to them, there was an indescribable sense of fear. Only when they saw the flame on the top of the mountain through the crack of the window did they feel relieved. Now, after the full moon night, everyone seemed to be alive again. On the second night when the two moons overlapped, although the moon still looked like one, it was not as big as last night. If you looked carefully, you could see some changes. The two moons were separating. When night fell, Xueqi felt that the ground under his feet was shaking, and the shaking was getting stronger and stronger. He had already learned more from old Ku, so he wasn't worried. He remembered that at this time last year in the cave, he thought there would be an earthquake. When he ran out of the cave, he was thrown back into the cave and laughed at by the other children. In the second half of the night, Xueqi was awakened by the shaking of the ground again. At the same time, there was a rumbling sound, like thousands of horses galloping. Just by listening to the sound, one could feel the momentum. The humidity in the air was increasing, and there was more and more water vapor. The wind was blowing fiercely outside the house. The gravel was lifted up and hit the wooden wall with a crackling sound. Xueqi even suspected that the wall of the wooden house would be penetrated by the gravel. The rumbling sound was getting louder and louder. The rumbling sound was accompanied by the violent shaking of the ground under his feet, and the humid water vapor in the air. Obviously, just as the old warrior said, the falling river that disappeared was rising again. A moment later. Woo! The ear-piercing shriek was extremely clear amidst the rumbling of the surroundings. After the shriek that sounded like a steam whistle, it was followed by the familiar muffled sound of thunder that covered the previous rumbling. It was like the declaration of a king, and all noise was under his command. And this was also like a signal to return. The creatures that disappeared during the rainy season all came back with the river. The rumbling sound gradually faded away, but the voices of the kings of the river were heard all night. It was believed that this night, many people in the tribe couldn't sleep, just like Xueqi. Chapter 95. In the morning, as soon as Xueqi walked out of the door, he saw Lang Jie running towards him, out of breath. "Xian, go to the river. Quick." Lang Ga's face was red, not sure if it was because he was too tired, or because he was too excited. "What's wrong?" Xueqi was confused. "Fish fence. Fish fence." Lang Jie did not say much, but pulled Xueqi and ran towards the river. Early in the morning, Lang Jie went to the riverside to check on the fish fences. Based on his experience in the past few years, he certainly knew that there would be a big wave by the river last night, and thought that maybe something would be trapped there. But in the past 2 days, no one came to Xueqi because they were not calm. Today, when he couldn't wait to check the fish fence, he found that there were many aquatic creatures in the fish fence. Not only the big-headed piranhas, but also many other creatures that he had never seen before. At that time, Lang Jie was so excited that he checked the fish fences one by one. Later, he asked some patrolling soldiers to help him kill the fish that had almost escaped from the fish fences. But the fish trapped in the fish fences hadn't been killed yet. Because of his excitement, he only paid attention to the creatures in the fish fences. Lang Jie did not remember until now, so he immediately went to find Xiao Xian. Last night, the river rose again and returned to its original state, as if the abyss 2 days ago was just an illusion. When Xiao Xian came to the river, there were many people around the fish fence. Some of them were warriors who were responsible for patrolling the riverbank, and some were people who came from the Mountain Foot district to check out the situation. The children in the orphan cave were also craning their necks. People were curious, and they loved to watch the fun. At the same time, they also knew that as long as they set up such a fence at the right time, many good things could be stopped. When Xiao Xian came over, he saw a 1-meter-long clam, which had been pried open and chopped into pieces and put aside. I met that this morning, and it almost escaped. Fortunately, it didn't run very fast. Lang Jie chuckled. That thing's shell is really tight. It took me a lot of effort to pry it open. After pushing the crowd away, Lang Jie excitedly pointed at a fish fence and said to Xiao Xian, "Xian, look, there are a lot of preys here. A lot of prey that I've never seen before." As a hunter who had hunted for more than 10 years, Lang Jie was naturally just like the other warriors. He was interested in many new prey and had already started to dissect some in the morning. Xiao Xian jumped onto a stone pillar of a fish fence and glanced around. There was something in every fish fence, and most of them were big-headed piranhas, which were all lifted up by the waves. Lang Jie was not interested in those big-headed piranhas, so he only kept 2 of them as a token. After discussing with Xiao Xian, he gave the rest to the people from the Mountain Foot district and the children in the orphan cave. After all, Lang Jie was not short of food, and he didn't care about this kind of fish. Xiao Xian didn't need it either. Lang Jie held the long spear and poked the piranhas out of the fish fence one by one. Every time the spear went down, a fish would be pierced through. With a flick of the spearhead, the piranhas would be picked out and thrown aside. The onlookers only wanted to see if the fish were back. If they were back, they could continue to fish in the following days. They didn't expect that they could also get some benefits from watching the fun. When they saw Lang Jie throw the fish aside, they all rushed up to grab them. There was no water in the fish fence, and there were many dead fish inside. They all killed each other. The blood that flowed out when Xiao Xian poked the fish made the fish fight even more fiercely. Xiao Xian saw many strange fish. Some had long and narrow eyes, some had flat bodies like manta rays, and some were like pufferfish, which swelled into a big ball and pushed the other fish to the side. Xiao Xian even saw some shrimps and crabs, but they looked different from the shrimps and crabs he saw in his previous life. They were not as big as the other fish. Well, even if there were big shrimps and crabs, the fish fences couldn't trap them. Even if they were here yesterday, they would have already run away. How about this one? I think it's edible. Hey, this one is good. It looks fierce. Even if it's not edible, take it out and play with it. Look at that fish, it changed color with a poke. There were many onlookers around. Xiao Xian was watching when he heard Lang Jie shout, "I think I've seen this one before when I was hunting, but it didn't look like this." Xiao Xian looked over, and when he saw the creature Lang Jie was talking about, he was immediately amused. Oh, there's a turtle. To be exact, it looked more like a snapping turtle. When Xiao Xian looked over, it was biting the tail of a piranha next to it, directly tearing off a large piece of meat from the tail. Xiao Xian pointed at the snapping turtle with his spear and said to Lang Jie, "Keep that for me, I'll cook it when I get back." "Okay, I'll keep it for you." Lang Jie was overjoyed by the day's harvest, and he didn't care at all about this thing that he seemed to have seen before. He didn't care whether the fish he caught in the fish fence could be eaten or how much energy they could provide. He just felt a sense of accomplishment when he was surrounded by so many people, just like when he was walking on the path of glory for the first time. See, besides setting ground bows, I also know how to set traps to catch fish. Lang Jie was instructing people to run errands, and many people from the Mountain Foot district came to Lang Jie to learn from him. Lang Jie, who was standing on the stone pillar of the fish fence, had not stopped talking since he came here. Xiao Xian looked around, and he didn't want to steal the limelight from Lang Ga. Although these prey were shared by him and Lang Jie, he just wanted to see what other creatures there were in the river besides the piranhas. Xiao Xian let Lang Jie deal with the rest of the things in the fish fence, except for the turtle and a few fish. Xiao Xian squeezed out of the crowd and walked along the river bank. In a small forest near the river bank, many branches were broken, which should have been caused by last night. When the river rose, there should be big waves, and the riverbank was obviously washed away, so the things in the fish fence might have been blown away by the waves. There were no broken branches on the shore, nor were there any floating objects on the river. Xian walked to the forest, broke off a branch, and threw it into the river. The branch floated on the river, rising and falling with the waves. But after only one breath, the branch sank, and after a short while, a series of bubbles rose up, like burps after a full meal. Those wood-eating insects also came back. During the rainy season, those insects might have followed the river beasts downstream, or like the long-tailed frogs, they had other places to go. But after the full moon, the river rose, and they came back. If his speculation was correct, Xian felt that if there was a boat between the end of the rainy season and the full moon, they might be able to safely row in the river. During that time, the river seemed to be very turbulent, but it was only the big-headed piranhas that were active. This was the so-called when the tiger is absent, the monkey is king. Without many natural enemies, it was no wonder that the piranhas were so active during that time, and could fight for a long time with just a little bit of blood. Xian could not confirm whether the truth was as he speculated. Unfortunately, this was only once a year. If he wanted to confirm it again, he could only wait until next year's rainy season. Back in the wooden house, Xian wrote down today's observations and his own speculation in a secret notebook. After writing, he carefully rolled up the animal's skin roll, tied it with a leather rope, and put it in a stone box. After sealing it, he moved the stone box to the corner under the bed. There were many things recorded in the animal skin roll, and Xian could not let other people in the tribe know about it. The information inside could cause panic, and could also bring more unnecessary trouble. Now Xian's ability was limited, and he could not bear the possible consequences, so he could only hide it. "I hope one day I can use it," Xian whispered. Was there only such a tribe in the world? Today, the people in the tribe as well as their predecessors had only come into contact with people in their own tribe. They had never seen other tribes. When they talked about other tribes, it was like people in his previous life talking about aliens. They were too distant, and only existed in legends, but they had never come into contact with them. Where were the others? Who were they? Xian could see some of them from the murals in the stone room in the cave. But how could he meet people from other tribes? Maybe he had to go further through the dangerous forest, or maybe he just had to cross the river at the foot of the mountain. Chapter 96. After everything in the tribe returned to normal, Xian's life also returned to its original routine. Every 20 to 30 days, he would go out to hunt, then return to the tribe to make stoneware, learn how to make traps from old Ku, and train Caesar and Cha-Cha. In the blink of an eye, more than half a year had passed. During this time, Xian expanded his wooden house. Under old Ku's guidance, he added stone to make a wooden house, which was more solid than the original one. In terms of construction, Xian was indeed not as good as old Ku and the others, so all he could do was to follow old Ku's guidance. The newly built wooden house was twice as big as old Ku's house. There was also a workshop for making stoneware. Old Ku's equipment had already been moved in. While Xian was making stoneware, old Ku was sleeping in the room next door. He did not mind the noise and would wake up to instruct Xian. When Xian went out to hunt, old Ku would sit by the window and bask in the sun in his spare time besides making stoneware and helping to train Caesar and Cha-Cha. Every time Gu came over and saw old Ku's comfortable appearance, he felt very emotional. A year ago, who would have thought that old Ku's life would change like this? Cha-Cha grew very fast. It had been half a year since it hatched. The weak chick that could be held in one's hand was already almost as tall as Xian's shoulder when it raised its head. The previous wooden house was too small, so Caesar and Cha-Cha wanted to tear it down whenever they made a fuss. Therefore, during the expansion this time, Xian specially built 2 nests, one for the bird's nest and the other for the wolf's nest. Caesar's wolf's nest was near the gate, so Xian was completely raising it like a dog. As for Cha-Cha's nest, it was specially built on the roof of the house. With Cha-Cha, the night swallow would not come close to the house at night. Sometimes in the morning, Cha-Cha would wake up and find several night swallow corpses next to its nest. It did not eat. After pecking the night swallow to pieces, it would fly to the river to feed the fish. Then it would watch the big-headed piranhas fight over it. It was not only cruel, it also had a bad taste. Xian always thought that the baby bird needed external help to learn how to fly, such as pushing it down from a high place. But in fact, Xian did not need to worry about it at all. Cha-Cha was restless when it first opened its eyes. When it could walk, it was even more troublesome. It often jumped off the stone table. By the time Xiao Xian realized what was going on, it could already fly very well. Moreover, it flew everywhere all day long, always provoking Caesar, chasing and pecking. When it saw that Caesar was serious, it would immediately fly high, which made Caesar so angry that he could only dig the ground. Once, when Xiao Xian came back from a hunt, he was summoned by the shaman. When he brought Cha-Cha to the shaman, he met Chief Ao, who was talking to the shaman. Ao said that Cha-Cha might be a bird similar to the giant mountain eagle. From what he said, it might be a close relative. Although it was not as big as the giant mountain eagle, it was still a bird of prey. Compared to other birds, it was still bigger. When Xiao Xian heard this, his first thought was, "Damn, no wonder it could eat so much." When it was a baby bird, it had a big appetite and was picky about its food. Now that it had grown up and could fly, it mostly relied on Xiao Xian to raise it. Occasionally, it would find some snacks to eat, because Xiao Xian did not let it go too far. As for what the giant mountain eagle looked like, Xiao Xian had never seen it before. Most people in the tribe had never seen it before. It was said that there was an eagle mountain far away, where the giant mountain eagle lived. Xiao Xian did not know what kind of bird Cha-Cha was, so he could only speculate based on what Ao said about the giant mountain eagle. If it was really a close relative, there must be some similarities. It was said that the giant mountain eagle was cold-blooded and cruel. Even if it was related by blood, it would still fight. However, when it came to fighting for territory, it would not fight to the death. As for birds or other birds that were not related by blood, it would fight until the end. After it won, it would try its best to kill the opponent. From what Xiao Xian observed, the Cha-Cha was really close to the giant mountain eagle. Their personalities were similar. The good thing was, because it had been tamed since it was young, it was much more restrained. "You found a good stone core again?" Old Ka stood by the window and asked when he saw Xiao Xian come back from the training ground with 2 big stones. "Yes, it feels good. I can make some spear darts. The fine stone leaves can also be made into stone needles for setting traps." After putting the 2 stones in the grinding workshop and drinking some water, Xiao Xian heard a few birds chirping in the sky outside. Walking out of the door, Xiao Xian looked at the birds circling in the sky above his head. He raised his hand and made a gesture. The birds chirped and flew away. "Cha-Cha is going out to play again?" Old Ku asked. "Yes. Fortunately, it knows not to fly too far. It will come back when it's time," Xiao Xian said as he entered the house and sat down. "It's still young. After it leaves the territory of the tribe, there will be many fierce birds in the sky. Cha-Cha is no match for them." Old Ku was a little worried. "Don't worry. It's very smart," Xiao Xian said. He was not lying. Cha-Cha did have many tricks up its sleeves. It was much smarter than Caesar and rarely suffered losses. Looking at Caesar, who came back from the training ground with Xiao Xian, Old Ku was silent for a while. Then he asked, "You've trained Caesar so well. Do you want to take it out in the future?" Xiao Xian nodded and said, "I want to take it hunting next year." "Are you really going to take Caesar?" Old Ku was not sure. Although Caesar had been trained better and better by Xiao Xian in the past year, and had learned how to cooperate with him, there were too many unpredictable factors in the real hunting ground. Any one of them could cause irreversible effects. "It's just a plan. I heard from Uncle Mai that we might need to hunt some difficult prey next year. I suggested it to Uncle Mai, and he said he would think about it. But we have to let Caesar show off in front of them." Although Caesar could make the decisions in the hunting group, and the others would not directly refute him even if they had different opinions, Xiao Xian still wanted everyone to know about Caesar's ability. It would be a pity to not use such a helper. After hunting with the group for so many times, Xiao Xian also knew that some special prey were not easy to hunt. But with Caesar, who had a keen sense of smell, the result would be different. Now Caesar had no problem in speed, but Xiao Xian was still training its reflexes and adaptability. Caesar was about the size of a wolf in the forest, but it did not have a murderous aura. No one in the tribe was afraid of it now. Since Xiao Xian had already made his decision, Old Ku did not intend to interfere. "Even if you don't train it well now, you'll have more time to train it in the winter when the hunting stops." Winter, Xiao Xian looked at a few ordinary-looking leaves on the wooden shelf, and said, "I can't be idle in the winter." He wanted to learn some knowledge about herbs from the shaman, and he had mentioned it when the shaman talked to him alone. He did not know if this skill could be taught, so he only tentatively and euphemistically mentioned it once, and the shaman agreed. Many people in the advanced group knew about the use of herbs, but they did not know much about it. The other people in the tribe did not seem to have mentioned similar problems. They probably thought that as long as they believed in the shaman, they could ask the shaman for help when they needed. They did not need to spend time to learn. Or, they thought that only the shaman could learn such profound skills, and no one else could do it. When Xueqi proposed to learn about herbs, the shaman was very happy. However, Xueqi did not have much time on weekdays, so the shaman asked him to go up the mountain in the winter when the hunting stopped. Therefore, Xueqi said that winter would be busy too. Chapter 97. With the end of the last hunting trip, the temperature gradually dropped. Xueqi dragged his last prey of the year down from the top of the mountain. The weather was getting colder. Winter would come in about 30 days. They put some food in the tribe's ice cave, and brought the rest down the mountain. The other hunting team was ready to go out, so they had to hurry up. When they came back, winter would officially come. Oldka met his friends on the mountain, and Caesar stayed there to carry him down the mountain. As for Cha-Cha, Xueqi saw it flying in the sky when he returned to the tribe. After the sword cleansing ceremony, it was nowhere to be seen. As soon as Xueqi entered the house, he saw an eagle lying on the stone table. The eagle's head was hanging on the edge of the table, motionless. Xueqi was so scared that he thought the eagle's head was broken. Fortunately, the eagle quickly turned over and jumped down from the stone table. When it flapped its wings, several wooden chairs around it were knocked over. Even after growing up, Cha-Cha still retained his childhood habits. Whenever he had nothing to do, he would lie on the stone table and throw everything on the table to the ground. Xueqi whipped him several times, but he still didn't change. Looking at the eagle squeezing over, Xueqi cut a piece of meat and threw it over. Go out and eat. Even though the house had been expanded, it could not bear the eagle flapping its wings in the house. After Cha-Cha left with the meat in its mouth, Xueqi planned to process the meat and marinate it. He looked at the stone jar in the kitchen and found it was full. The kitchen was a room specially set aside by Xueqi. There was a simple stone stove in it, which was more convenient than a stone pot. Xueqi remembered there was an empty stone jar in the corner, so he walked over to take a look. There was an old stone vat, which was brought here by Old Ku. It was quite old, and the mouth of the vat was cracked. It could not hold much water, so it was put here temporarily to store something else. There was a wooden lid on top of the stone vat. It had not been touched for some time, so it was covered with a layer of dust. Xueqi opened the wooden lid and looked inside. He saw a creature the size of a wash basin sitting quietly inside. There were many jagged thorns on its back. The water in the stone tank only slightly covered its back. Seeing it, Xueqi remembered. This turtle was caught in the fish fence during the high tide of the 2 moons. Xueqi asked Lang Jie to keep it for him to stew. Later, when Lang Jie brought it over, Xueqi directly threw it into the stone vat in Old Ku's house. Later on, due to hunting, building a house, moving, and a series of other things, it was put aside. Xueqi had almost forgotten about it, and Old Ku had not eaten it either. It had been put aside until now. It was already the end of the year. Almost half a year had passed, but it had not starved to death. Probably because it was starving, it did not have much energy. Xueqi poked it twice with a wooden stick, but it only moved a little. Should I stew it today? Xueqi thought. Just as he was thinking about whether to stew it today or a few days later, Old Ku came back with Caesar. Seeing Old Ku come in, Xueqi asked, "Do you think we should eat it today or a few days later?" "It's still here," Old Ku said in surprise. When Lang Jie sent the turtle over, he did not say that Xueqi wanted to kill it and eat it. In addition, Caesar and Cha-Cha were in front of him, so Old Ku thought that Xueqi wanted to keep it for fun. After all, he already had 2. So it would not be strange to have one more. Therefore, after Old Ku put it in the stone vat, he only added some water to it from time to time, and threw some meat scraps into it when he was free. He thought that Xueqi would care about it, but he didn't know that Xueqi had already forgotten about it. Later, after the house was expanded and moved over, Old Ku asked about the turtle again. Only then did he know that Xueqi had no intention of keeping it. He only kept it as food, so he did not continue to feed it. There was a difference in treatment between food and pets. In the past, Old Ku thought that pets were just spare food. Later, after spending a long time with Caesar and Cha-Cha, he developed some feelings for them. Every day, Caesar would carry him everywhere, so naturally, he did not want to let Caesar starve. However, food was different. In the minds of the tribesmen, since it was food, why should they waste food to feed it? He put it aside until now. Yes, this was caught when the river rose after the full moon. I asked Lang Jie to cook it for me, but I forgot about it when I got busy. Xiao Xian said. I haven't fed it for a long time, but it's still alive. Old Ku sighed. After all, they did not lack food. They did not even finish the food in the previous stone vats, so they did not pay attention to the stone vat in the corner. This kind of creature can withstand hunger, has a long life, and does not die easily. Xiao Xian said as he threw a piece of freshly cut meat into the vat. The originally listless turtle immediately bit the meat. When it bit the meat with its eagle beak, because it used too much force, it pecked the wall of the stone vat, making a dong sound. Xiao Xian looked at the inner wall of the stone vat and found that there were all kinds of scratches and bite marks. If it was not for the thickness of the stone vat, it would have been pecked through. Perhaps, most of the cracks on the stone vat were due to the turtle. Why don't we eat it today? Xiao Xian turned to ask Old Ku, but found that Old Ku was staring at the turtle in the stone vat, thinking about something. Xian. Old Ku stared at the turtle and said, What? Didn't you say that you wanted to go to the mountain to learn from the shaman in winter? Old Ku asked. That's my plan, and the shaman agreed. Xiao Xian said, You can offer it to the shaman. Old Ku raised his finger and pointed at the turtle in the stone vat that was active again after eating the meat. Offer it to the shaman? The shaman did not lack food, so why would he care about this? But soon, Xiao Xian also reacted. Old Ku thought that the turtle had a good meaning. Just like what Xiao Xian said, longevity and immortality. Xiao Xian did not know what the turtle meant here, but in his previous life, many people did regard the turtle as a symbol of longevity and immortality. Moreover, this turtle really had a strong vitality. After leaving it here for so long, it was so hungry that it did not even have the strength to peck at the vat. Otherwise, such a stone vat would not be able to trap it. Thinking about it, when he caught it, the Lang Jie tortured the prey trapped in the fish fence for a while. Later, when he brought it here, he starved it for a long time. For nearly half a year, it did not eat much, but it still stubbornly survived. This made Old Ku believe in the meaning of longevity and immortality that Xiao Xian said. People in the tribe always thought that things with good meaning should be offered to people they respected. Old Ku was one of them. In addition, Xiao Xian wanted to learn from the shaman, which was a kind of honor in his eyes. It was natural to offer this turtle that symbolized longevity and immortality to the shaman. Seeing that Old Ku was so insistent, Xiao Xian did not force him to eat it. After all, he was not short of food. Okay, next time I go up the mountain to find the shaman, I will bring it with me. Xiao Xian answered. Hearing this, Old Ku smiled. Before that, you have to take good care of it. Old Ku thought that the things offered to the shaman must be in the best condition, or they would not be able to show their sincerity. So after 10 days of good food and drinks, Xiao Xian held the turtle's back with both hands, and lifted it up the mountain with its belly facing out. On the mountain, the shaman was sitting in the stone house, writing something on a roll of animal skin with a brush made from animal hair. When he heard that Xiao Xian came to offer food, he was curious. After all, Xiao Xian's hunting team had returned to the tribe for so many days. What could they offer now? Putting down the brush, the shaman raised his head and was about to say something, when he saw the turtle in Xiao Xian's hand. The shaman's old face twitched, and he swallowed back the words he was about to say. In the past, when other people in the tribe came to offer food, they would cut the meat and clean it up. However, when it came to Xiao Xian, he directly brought a turtle over. It was still alive. This turtle had a hooked beak, and there were bits of wood around its mouth. Obviously, this turtle was very destructive. When it was brought in by Xiao Xian, it had a murderous look on its face, as if it wanted to bite everything it saw. Sorry. This is the last chapter for tonight. I will update earlier tomorrow, and will continue to update on the weekend. Chapter 98. What are you? The shamaness looked at Xiao Xian. She didn't know what to say. He hadn't received a living creature for many years. It's for you. Xiao Xian put the tortoise on the ground next to him. After thinking for a while, he put it upside down. Every time the tortoise was about to turn over, he would push it back with his hand. I brought it here and asked when I can start learning herbs from you, Xueqi said. The shaman looked away from the tortoise, thought for a while, and said, you go up the mountain in 10 days. During this time, he still had some things to deal with and several paintings to draw, so he couldn't spare any time. Okay, I'll come back in 10 days. Seeing that the shaman still had a lot of empty animal skins to draw on, Xueqi knew that the shaman had a lot of things to do, so he didn't say anything more. He bowed and left. As for the tortoise, the shaman had someone watching over it, so it couldn't hurt anyone. After Xueqi left, the shaman quietly looked at the tortoise that had turned over on the ground next to him. The tortoise used to be murderous, but now it wasn't as aggressive as it was in Xueqi's house. It just opened its beak slightly, looking at the shaman, but didn't bite him. After staring at the tortoise for a while, the shaman called in the guard outside, and asked him to move the tortoise to another place. When Xueqi returned home, Old Ku was waiting at the door, looking very nervous. People in the tribe cared about the shaman very much, and Old Ku also wanted to know if the shaman would be satisfied with the offerings. How is it? Does the shaman like it? Before Xueqi entered the door, Old Ku hurriedly asked. He grabbed the crutch so hard that his blue veins bulged, and the crutch almost broke. Xueqi recalled the shaman's expression at that time and said, he should be satisfied. The shaman asked me to go up the mountain in 10 days. Hearing Xueqi's words, Old Ku breathed a sigh of relief. Since the shaman had asked Xueqi to go to the mountain, it meant that he wasn't dissatisfied. In fact, Xueqi felt that Old Ku's worries were unnecessary. After interacting with the shaman for a long time, Xueqi could tell that the shaman was not an inflexible old antique. He would not change his attitude towards people just because he liked the gifts offered. Since you will go up the mountain in 10 days, before that, you can go to the hunting group to learn more about herbs and plants. By then you can satisfy the shaman. Old Ku wanted to go to some of his former comrades, but most of the people he knew who knew about herbs and plants were in another hunting group, and had already gone out. When the hunting group came back, Xueqi had already gone up the mountain. Generally speaking, in a year, the activity of the wild beasts in the forest would be in a wave shape, and would reach its peak during the full moon period. After the full moon period, the activity of the wild beasts in the forest would gradually decrease. At the end of the year, some of the prey would hide and prepare for hibernation. In order to ensure enough food in the winter, the hunting team would go out for hunting longer than before and after the full moon period. Therefore, even after 20 days, the hunting team might not come back immediately. After Xueqi went up the mountain, he would have to wait for another 3 or 4 days for the hunting team to come back. If there were other troubles, it might take longer. I can't help you with herbs. Old Ku could not remember the knowledge about herbs that he had learned in the past. He was afraid that he would embarrass Xueqi in front of the shaman if he taught him the wrong things. After all, he was the shaman. However, Xueqi was not as nervous and anxious as Old Ku. He did what he should do, such as making stoneware, taking Caesar and Cha-Cha to the training ground, and practicing the traps and lassos that he had just learned. In this season, many trees on the hills of the training ground bore fruits. Many people went to pick them, and many fruits took a short time to ripen. One day, they looked like peanut-sized green fruits, but the next day, they would be as big as apples, and their color would change. If they were not picked at this time, the fruit would rot in a day. Therefore, many people went to the training ground to pick fruits every day, but most of them were from the mountain foot district. After all, they had less food, and it was always good to have more food. Finally the day came. Before Xueqi went up the mountain again, Old Ku reminded him again and again not to make the shaman angry. What a great honor it was to learn from the shaman. No matter what he thought, Xueqi nodded seriously. Don't worry. Old Ku was speechless. Old Ku was relieved at first, but when he heard Xueqi's words, he became worried again. Looking at Xueqi's back, Old Ku stood there, worried. Xueqi did not bring Caesar up the mountain, but Cha-Cha followed them all the way to the top. When they came to the stone house where the shaman talked to people, Xueqi saw the 2 soldiers in charge of guarding the house staring at the sky. The 2 soldiers naturally knew the eagle hovering in the sky. After all, it was brought to the shaman when it was very young, and it was blessed by the shaman, so no one dared to throw it to kill it. Xueqi made a gesture to the sky, and Cha-Cha chirped and flew back down the mountain. It was not the first time that the 2 soldiers saw Xueqi do this, but every time they saw it, they could not help but be surprised and envious. They had never thought that a bird that was so aggressive in the forest could be so obedient. Because of this, their attitude towards Xueqi was much better than the people who lived at the foot of the mountain. When they saw Xueqi coming, they would smile every time. Except for the first few times, Xueqi did not need to show his pattern plate now. He could walk directly into the house, and no one would stop him. The shaman was still arranging the animal skin rolls. Xueqi only glanced at them in a hurry, but he could not understand them. They seemed to be drawings, but they were too abstract. They were much simpler than the drawings on the animal skin rolls in other people's hands, and the murals in the cave. They looked like symbols, each with only 1 or 2 strokes, but the shaman drew each stroke very slowly, as if it took a lot of effort to complete each stroke. Xueqi did not disturb him, and sat down on the side. After about 5 minutes, the shaman put down the brush, took a deep breath, and looked at Xueqi with a faint smile. I have already told Xueqi. You can go directly to the medicine house. She will tell you what to do. Xueqi did not know who Xueqi was, but he probably was the shaman's apprentice. Looking at the shaman's current situation, he could not leave. He had only drawn a third of the animal skin roll, and it was not good to stop halfway. Xueqi understood that the shaman could not leave now. Okay, then I will go first, Xueqi said. The medicine house was where the shaman used to mix herbs. Among the many houses near the top of the mountain, there were 4 at the top. They were the stone house where the shaman summoned people, the stone house where the chief summoned people, the stone house where the higher-ups of the tribe met people, and the medicine house. These 4 houses were in 4 directions. If 2 opposite stone houses were connected, they would form a crisscrossing 10. It was said that these 4 houses were connected to the fire pit, and could be used as a greenhouse in winter. As for how to connect them, that was the power of the shaman and the fire seed. On normal days, except for the seriously ill and the wounded sent by the hunting team, no one else was allowed to get close to the medicine house. Xueqi only knew the specific location of the medicine house, but he had never entered it. There was also a guard in front of the medicine house. After Xueqi handed over the patterned plate, the guard let him in. Obviously, the shaman had already informed him. He could smell the herbs from far away, and the smell was even stronger when he got closer. Xueqi lifted the animal skin curtain of the medicine house and walked in. What came into view was a large square stone table placed there. At this moment, a little girl who didn't look very old was busy in front of the square table. The sleeves of the beast's skin coat she was wearing only reached her elbows, and the beast's skin pants she was wearing did not reach her ankles. At this moment, she was barefooted, walking on the uneven but carefully hammered ground. She walked along the stone table, handling the herbs that were placed all over the table. Behind her, a turtle, which Xueqi was very familiar with, was slowly following her. Every step she took, the turtle followed her. Chapter 99. Xueqi put down the animal skin curtain and said, "Hello, my name is Xian. The shaman asked me to come here to learn." The person who was processing the herbs on the stone plate raised her head and looked at Xueqi. She smiled and said, "I'm Xueqi." Although she had a smile on her face, Xueqi didn't think she was friendly or malicious. She was just like the shamaness, smiling faintly at everyone. She looked friendly, but that was just a facade. She was really taught by the shaman. Even her smile was the same. Compared to other people who had awakened their totemic power, Xueqi was relatively thin and weak. After all, in the tribe, no matter if it was a boy or a girl, after awakening their totemic power, their physique would be strengthened a lot, and they would look stronger. The temperature in the room was a little higher than outside. Just like what people in the tribe said, this room was connected to the fire pit. Xueqi did not know how the heat was transmitted. After all, there were no suspicious objects around the room. Walking to the stone table, Xueqi asked, "What do I need to do first?" Putting down the stone plate in his hand, Xueqi thought for a while, and said, "You can watch from the side and see what I'm going to do." Okay. Xueqi had no objection. He wanted to observe first. He still did not know how to process the herbs here. The plants here were too strange, but similar to what Xueqi learned in his previous life, most of these medicinal plants needed to be selected and processed. Some parts of the same plant could be used to save people, while some could be used to poison others. Up to now, Xueqi only knew a few basic ways to use the herbs he saw when he went out with the hunting team. He also learned a little about harvesting when he followed the advance group. For example, when was the best time to harvest? Which plants could be harvested from the ground, which needed to be uprooted, and some could only be harvested when flowering. As for now, the first thing he needed to know was how to select the plants after they were delivered here. Xueqi was doing the same thing now, and he had already processed more than half of the plants. After all, it had been 20 days since the last hunting team came back, and the plants that could not be kept for a long time had already been processed, and the plants that could be kept for a long time were processed last. Xiao walked over and stood beside Xueqi, watching her every step carefully. When the turtle saw Xiao approaching, it bit Xiao's leg. Xiao's line of sight had been fixed on Xueqi's actions as he processed the herbs. He did not look at the tortoise, but his hanging hand moved quickly. He drew out his stone knife and slapped the back of the knife at the tortoise's beak that looked like an eagle's hook. Pah! The tortoise shook its head after being slapped. It still looked at Xiao with disdain. It probably remembered how Xiao treated it in the past. But then, to Xiao's surprise, the tortoise did not bite him again. It was completely different from when they were in the stone vat at the foot of the mountain, when it could not wait to kill a target as soon as it saw one. Xiao did not understand. Why did the tortoise, which used to love biting people, settle down when it came here? Was it because of the witch? He did not understand. Anyway, the tortoise did not pester and bite people anymore, which saved Xiao a lot of trouble. It was almost winter, and the temperature had dropped a little. If he used the standard of pet tortoises in his previous life, the tortoise's appetite and activity should have been greatly reduced. But now, this weird-looking tortoise with even weirder attributes had completely overturned Xiao's previous understanding of it. The tortoise looked energetic, much livelier than when it was thrown into the water vat by Xiao 10 days ago. Although it did not crawl fast, the tortoise's steps were domineering. Few of the new plants brought back by the hunting team can be eaten directly. Most of them have dirt and other impurities in them. Xueqi explained some basic knowledge to Xiao when he was processing the herbs in the stone plate. Newly brought back plants had a lot of dirt and other impurities in them, and some of them also had a high water content. If they were not processed in time, they would also go through qualitative changes. Maybe they would grow moldy like ordinary plants, or maybe they would go through other changes. Therefore, the plants brought back by the advance group were directly sent here, and the medicine house would immediately process the ones that were most likely to go through qualitative changes. After the initial washing of the plants, we need to remove the dirt and sort them out. Then we need to remove the non-medicinal parts. For example, the outer shell of this fruit must be removed. Its outer shell can make people have diarrhea, Xueqi said. Obviously, this kind of fruit was very poisonous. It could make people in the tribe, who were physically strong, suffer from severe diarrhea and even urinate and defecate. Even warriors could not stand it. Xiao watched Xueqi skillfully cut open the hard outer shell of the fruit with a sharpened stone knife. He peeled off the outer shell of the fruit with long hairs like whiskers, but the translucent and solidified flesh inside was not damaged at all. Obviously, Xueqi was very familiar with this kind of treatment. Xiao wanted to ask what to do with the poisonous outer shell of the fruit, but before he could ask, he saw Xueqi throw the outer shell into the tortoise's open mouth. Xiao was speechless. What the hell? Wasn't it poisonous? One threw it away calmly, while the other could not wait to eat it. Xiao was stunned. Did the shaman send the tortoise here just to be a lab rat? Or a trash can to dispose of waste? Xueqi did not notice Xiao's strange behavior. Because she wanted to demonstrate to Xiao, she did not continue to deal with the same thing. Instead, she walked to another stone plate and picked up a plant that looked like a withered leaf. She continued, not every kind of fruit needs to be removed like the fruit. For example, you need to remove the stalk. The stalk will make people's hands and feet numb. Xiao watched as she skillfully peeled off the stalk, then threw all the peeled leaves into the tortoise's mouth again. Xiao was speechless. Looking at the tortoise chewing with its beak, Xiao thought to himself, severe diarrhea. Hands and feet numb. It's all fed to the tortoise. Moreover, the tortoise was fine after eating it. These are all harmful. Why are you still feeding it? Xiao asked. When he gave the tortoise to the shaman, he thought that the shaman would stew it directly. He did not expect it to be sent here, and it was so obedient. What surprised Xiao the most was that Xueqi actually cut off the parts of the plant that were identified as harmful to people and fed them to the tortoise. The tortoise even ate it. Big mouthfuls. The shaman said that you can try to feed it some. Guizhe did not feel that there was anything wrong. Since the shaman said it, it must be correct. She just had to carry it out. Sure enough, it was an undead species. Xiao Xian had a new understanding of the strange species in this place. He followed Guizhe around the stone table. After looking at the preliminary treatment methods for many kinds of plants, Guizhe continued with her task. After looking for a while, Xiao Xian asked, "Is there any relevant information, such as animal skin scrolls? I can take a look first." After all, the advanced group had spent a lot of effort to find these plants. They couldn't let a newbie like Xiao Xian operate them. Even if the steps were very simple, they couldn't let him operate them. Unless the shamaness agreed, Guizhe couldn't make this decision. Xiao Xian could not help even if he wanted to. Guizhe thought about it and felt that it was right. She also began to read the drawings and related records on the animal skin scrolls very early. After she understood the basic knowledge, she began to learn from the shaman. However, compared to Xiao Xian, she had someone to explain to her when she read the animal skin scrolls. She was willing to explain to Xiao Xian, but unfortunately, there were still a lot of plants that had not been processed. Guizhe pointed to a small stone table in the corner where there were many animal skin scrolls. She said, "They are all over there. You can read them. Then I will go first. You can continue. I will ask you later if I don't understand." Xiao Xian came to the stone table. Some of the animal skin scrolls on the table looked old, but the one on the side was relatively new. It should have been made this year. Xiao Xian first took a slightly old animal skin scroll and opened it to have a look. There were several drawings of plants, and there was a brief description next to them. However, it was not detailed, and the drawings were not detailed. How to identify them? In the eyes of a layman, looking at these drawings, more than 4 out of 10 would feel that they looked the same. Weren't they all leaves, roots, barks, seeds and so on? They all looked the same. There was only one color, the drawing style was rough, and the annotations were too thin. There was no real object to compare with, and no one to explain. Just by looking at these animal skin scrolls, one could not understand much. After flipping through a few old animal skin scrolls, Xiao Xian found that they were all similar in style. Then he set his eyes on the newer one. The quality of the animal skin scroll looked much better than the other scrolls. After opening the slightly new animal skin scroll and seeing the contents, Xiao Xian was stunned. If the previous scrolls were rough, then the drawings on this one were extremely simple. Just like the symbols drawn by the shaman today, no one could understand what these drawings were. Staring at a drawing that looked like a blob of ink, Xiao Xian wondered if this was a lump of paint that fell from the shaman's brush when he was drawing. Unexpectedly, in the next moment, Xiao Xian seemed to see a round brown fruit gradually emerge from the drawing. Chapter 100. Xiao Xian was startled. He moved his eyes away and looked at the animal skin roll again. It was still the same symbols. However, when he stared at the ink blob for a while, the brown fruit appeared again. It was very clear, as if a real object was placed in front of his eyes. Even the wrinkles on the fruit skin could not be seen in detail. What was going on? In the past, Xiao Xian would only see those illusionary pictures in front of his eyes when he was in danger or in a special environment. But now, he was not in danger, and he did not encounter any special terrain like the Green Thief. He was just staying in this medicine house. If the illusionary pictures were because of this special place, why did they only appear now after so long? This animal skin roll was not ordinary. Xiao Xian no longer stared at the ink blob. Instead, he changed the picture and continued to stare at it. Soon, Xiao Xian found that the other pictures were similar to the ink blob. After staring for a while, a picture of a real object would gradually appear on the drawings. It was very clear. Xiao Xian saw a lot of herbs in this animal skin roll. Among them were the wind ball and the green thief that he had found when he went out with the advance group this year. There were also many other strange-looking herbs. What surprised Xiao Xian the most was that the wind ball and the green thief had some traces because of the traps. Xiao Xian had set up the traps himself and caught these 2 herbs. Naturally, he could recognize them at a glance. The pictures in this animal skin roll were exactly the same as the ones in Xiao Xian's memory. They were the real objects reproduced. Looking at the other pictures, there were not only pictures of plants, but also of animals. On this animal skin scroll, the first half of the scroll was drawn with plant medicinal materials, while the second half was drawn with animal medicinal materials. However, no matter which type it was, there was only a simple symbol, and there was no description of how to obtain these finished products. There were many animal herbs. Xiao Xian could only see the shape of the finished products, but he could not tell which part of which animal these finished products were. The annotations on the side were limited, so it was impossible to understand it in detail. Xiao Xian flipped through the rest of the animal skin scrolls on the stone table. Except for the one in his hand, the rest of the animal skin scrolls were very ordinary. It could be seen that the artist had tried his best to draw the objects as clearly as possible, but his drawing skills were limited. Xiao Xian could not see the images of the objects in these drawings. Compared to the reproduction of the objects, the difference was huge. Xiao Xian recalled the time when he went to the shaman's place and saw the shaman's drawings. At first glance, those drawings looked very simple, but every stroke seemed to be extremely difficult. Now, thinking about the animal skin scroll in his hand, Xiao Xian had a guess in his heart. When Xueqi finished processing the herbs in a stone plate, Xiao Xian took the special animal skin scroll and asked, "Was this scroll written by the shaman himself?" Xueqi looked sideways and saw the animal skin scroll in Xiao Xian's hand. Her originally calm face suddenly became nervous. She quickly walked over and looked carefully. After confirming that the animal skin scroll was not damaged, she breathed a sigh of relief. She originally wanted to take the animal skin scroll from Xiao Xian's hand and put it away to avoid any damage. However, thinking that the shaman had personally agreed to let Xiao Xian come to learn, she hesitated for a moment and withdrew her hand. This is indeed written by the shaman himself. This is the one he wrote this year. You. Be careful when you read it. Don't break it. Xueqi stared at the animal skin scroll in Xiao Xian's hand and said seriously, "Every time the shaman comes, he will look through it. If he breaks it, he will be angry." Xiao Xian naturally knew how important the shaman was to the people in the tribe. Nodding, Xiao Xian replied, "I know. I will be careful. By the way, have you read this too?" Xiao Xian raised the animal skin scroll in his hand and asked. Xueqi heard this and smiled. Her eyes were filled with unconcealed reverence. She said, "This was written by the shaman himself. Only he can read it. No one else can understand it." She thought that Xiao Xian was the same as her, who couldn't understand what was written on the animal skin roll. She had seen similar animal skin rolls when she first entered the medicine house. However, she heard that this kind of animal skin roll belonged to the shaman volume, which was completely different from ordinary animal skin rolls. Wu roll. Only the shaman can understand it. So if you can't understand this, you should change to other animal skin scrolls. After saying this, Xueqi went back to the big stone table to process the herbs. There were still several stone plates on the table that needed to be processed. Moreover, the hunting team would be back soon, so the herbs needed to be mixed as soon as possible. She did not have much time to talk to Xiao Xian. After Xueqi left, Xiao Xian looked down at the animal skin scroll in his hand and whispered, "Wu roll." Xueqi misunderstood him, but he did not explain. It was even more impossible for him to say to Xueqi, "Ah, I'm sorry, but I can understand it." Wu roll. Only the shaman can understand it? Who said that? Xiao Xian shook his head and moved a wooden chair over. He spread the animal skin scroll on the small stone table and continued to look at the drawings. He had only roughly glanced at a few of them, and there were many others that he had not seen yet. Even if the annotations were not clear, he could at least remember them. Maybe he would encounter them when he went hunting in the future. Since it was called Wu Roll, it must be because of the shaman. The drawings made by the shaman were different from those made by others. The shaman might have used some special ability to draw his consciousness into the drawings. Even though the drawings looked simple, there were many secrets hidden in them. If anyone could understand these drawings, why would Tar and the other hunters have other drawings? The drawings in the hands of the two hunting team leaders were of course drawn separately, so that they could be understood. Xiao Xian left the medicine house in the afternoon. He could not spend the night there. Not long after Xiao Xian left, the shaman came to the medicine house. Hearing Xueqi respectfully report the results of the processing of the herbs in the afternoon, the shaman smiled and said, "Very good. Thank you for your hard work." The old man and the young man had the same expression on their faces, but Xueqi's face was filled with joy because of the shaman's compliment. After asking about the herbs, the shaman asked again, "How was Xian's performance today?" "I taught him how to process the herbs, and then he was reading the animal skin scroll. Guizhe briefly told the shaman what had happened today, and pointed to the small stone table. He also looked at your animal skin scroll. I guess he was just like me, confused. The shaman's expression changed slightly, but it was too fast for Guizhe to notice. How long did he look at that animal skin scroll? Asked the shaman. Almost half a day. He even yawned. Guizhe did not say the second part, for he was afraid that the shaman would be angry. The shaman was silent for a while, and then said slowly, "Don't mind him. You go about your business. The hunting team will be back soon. Prepare 3 portions of the herbs we need." Yes. The next day, Xueqi came to the medicine house again. Guizhe was still busy at the big stone table. Xueqi stood aside and watched him for a while. He helped to move things down, and read the preliminary processing methods of some new herbs. After reading all of them, he turned to other places. When he glanced at the small stone table where the animal skin scroll was placed, he paused. He found that there was another animal skin scroll on the table. Judging from the quality of the animal skin scroll, it was very similar to the one from the Wu roll yesterday. Xueqi picked up the new animal skin scroll and opened it. What came into his eyes was indeed the same as the one from the Wu roll yesterday. However, this animal skin scroll did not contain a single image, but a series of images. What was recorded on this animal skin scroll was the processing methods for 8 commonly used medicinal plants. From selecting, cutting, steaming, drying, and storing, there were all descriptions. Looking at these pictures, Xueqi felt as if he was looking at a pair of experienced hands, demonstrating a series of processes in front of him. After a series of rune images, there were also annotations. The images and the words were very clear and profound. Chapter 101. Not only that day, but every day after that, every time Xueqi went up the mountain to the medicine house, he would find a new set of Wu roll on the small stone table in the corner. From the beginning of the collection and processing of the basic plants, to how to lure the animal herbs, how to capture them, how to process them, and how to collect and prepare the rare herbs. All of these were recorded on the animal skin roll in the form of Wu roll. Every time Xueqi looked at it, he could see the real scenes. Because the pictures were all continuous, instead of separate ones, when he looked at them together, he could see different scenes. Sometimes Xueqi even had a feeling that he was doing it himself. He could feel the touch, the strength, and so on more or less. The Wu roll was very precious. Since the shaman took it out, obviously, he already knew that Xueqi could understand it. The shaman. Many things could not be hidden from him. And the extra Wu roll on the stone table made Xueqi understand the shaman's attitude. One day, when Xueqi was looking at a Wu roll in the corner, someone ran in and said, "Guizhe, the hunting team is back. The shaman wants you to go there." There was a room next to the medicine house, which was used to treat the wounded. Every time the hunting team sent the wounded back, they would directly send them there. It was close to the medicine house, so they could just go there and get whatever herbs they needed, saving time. The Guizhe did not waste any time. He put down what he was doing and went there. As for Xueqi, he was not allowed to go in. Without permission, no one was allowed to go in case they would interfere with the treatment. Xueqi felt a little regretful. He wanted to see how the shaman treated the wounded, but he was stopped, so he could only sit in the medicine house. Guizhe went out for a while and ran back to the medicine house. She took a few packets of medicine that had already been wrapped. Half a minute later, she hurriedly ran back. Bitter sandroot, 7 forks, palmer fruit, heart-piercing stem. Guizhe murmured the names of the herbs as she took out some herbs from the stone jars or wooden boxes that contained the finished products. Seeing her in such a hurry, Xueqi guessed that the number of wounded warriors sent by the hunting team was more than expected, and the herbs she had prepared were not ready. The herbs she had just taken were not enough, so she had to make some on the spot. There was no need for a scale. Guizhe only needed to casually grab it with his hand, and the dosage of the same medicine was almost the same. This was the conclusion that Xueqi had come to after watching from the sidelines for the past few days. This kind of kung fu was not something that could be achieved in a short period of time. Perhaps the shaman had been training Guizhe since a long time ago. Everyone in the tribe thought that the medicine in the bag was made by the shaman himself, but now it seemed that many of them were made by the Guizhe. "Do you need help?" Xueqi asked. Guizhe was going to refuse, but after thinking for a while, he nodded. However, he did not let Xueqi deal with the herbs directly, but only asked him to pass the things to man. What happened? Not enough medicine? How many people were injured this time? Xiao Xian asked. 9 were injured, Guizhe said. Those who were sent back were naturally heavily injured. 9 heavily injured people were indeed more than the usual number of injured people. However, fortunately, no one died. The heart-piercing stem is not enough. Help me bring the box with the heart-piercing stem, Guizhe said hurriedly. Okay. Xiao Xian had already memorized the locations of the herbs, so he did not need to be reminded by Guizhe. He went to bring a big wooden box. The heart-piercing stem was a kind of herb that grew on the green land. It was only as thick as a little finger, with a thin layer of skin on the outside. There was a thin black thread-like core in the center of the stem. The skin could not be used as medicine, and the black core in the middle was poisonous. Therefore, when dealing with the heart-piercing stem, in addition to peeling off the skin, the black core in the middle also had to be removed. Although he was in a hurry, Guizhe's movements were still orderly. However, he was still too slow. The heart-piercing stem was not easy to deal with, and it was very time-consuming. Xiao Xian had seen her deal with it, and each stem took at least half an hour. Because of this, Guizhe was so anxious that his face was sweating. He held the knife steadily and faster, but it was not as perfect as usual. After all, he was going to save people now. He would rather spend more medicine to deal with the heart-piercing stem as soon as possible and bring it to the shaman. The heart-piercing stem was generally used to treat internal injuries that were beyond the warrior's self-healing range. Such injuries were extremely dangerous, so they had to be treated immediately after they were sent back. The medicine had to be prepared immediately. Every minute delay would increase the danger. Seeing that there were still several heart-piercing stem in the wooden box, Xiao Xian reached out and took one. He gently pinched the stem of the heart-piercing stem from the bottom to the top, along the spiral. Don't mess. Guizhe noticed Xiao Xian's movements and was about to tell Xiao Xian not to mess with the herbs. After all, he was a greenhorn. However, when he turned his head and saw the scene in front of him, he held back his words. After Xiao Xian quickly finished pinching, he held the heart-piercing stem that was half an arm long in one hand and a small stone knife in the other. Xiao Xian specially polished the knife with a piece of high-quality stone, and the stone was sent to him by the shaman in the first half of the year because of Xiao Xian's meritorious service. It was not big, after all. High-quality stone was extremely difficult to find. After polishing some small stone tools, Xiao Xian kept the rest of the stone. When he saw the small stone knife Guizhe used to peel the bark on the first day, he went back and polished one himself. High-quality stone was not easy to polish, so it took him a few days to finish. He just brought it with him today and didn't expect to use it. The knife flashed several times. After several times, Xiao Xian withdrew the knife and pulled the heart-piercing stem from the top to the other side like peeling a banana. It was very smooth. It was completely different from when Guizhe peeled the heart-piercing stem. Guizhe even forgot what he was doing. He opened his eyes wide and stared at Xiao Xian's movements. When the skin was pulled close to the end, according to Guizhe's usual practice, he should use the stone knife to directly cut off the skin and part of the end. As for the inner core, he usually cut it vertically from the middle and carefully dug it out bit by bit. However, Xiao Xian didn't do that. Instead, when he got close to the end, he pinched the end and twisted it gently. Then, he pulled out a thin black inner core along with the end. Guizhe. The expression on his face was already frozen. It wasn't that she hadn't tried before. It was because she had tried that she knew how difficult it was to pull out the inner core like this. However, in front of her, a newbie who didn't know anything did it so easily, as if he had practiced it thousands of times. The whole set of movements was smooth and without any pause. In fact, Xiao Xian wasn't too sure why he could do it so perfectly for the first time. It was like a kind of instinct. It wasn't Xiao Xian's own instinct, but after watching the Wu roll, it was like a kind of instinctive consciousness. When he was operating, it seemed that someone was telling him how to do it, how to use force and how to pull. The whole set of movements almost completely copied the scene of the string of runes about the heart-piercing stem that appeared on the animal skin roll. Because of Xiao Xian's participation, the medicine was quickly prepared. Guizhe took the medicine and ran over, leaving Xiao Xian and the turtle in the medicine house. About 2 hours later, the shaman came over, looking tired. Guizhe stayed there to take care of the wounded, and didn't go back to the medicine house with the shaman. When the shaman came in, Xiao Xian was feeding the turtle with the medicine waste. "How's it going over there?" Xiao Xian asked and handed a glass of water to him. The shaman sat on the wooden chair and took 2 sips of water. He calmed down and said, "It's fine. That means that there is no danger." Xiao Xian continued to feed the turtle with the waste. The shaman stared at Xiao Xian. Guizhe had already said that Xiao Xian dealt with the heart-piercing stem. He was not too surprised. He glanced at the stone table in the corner and the animal skin roll on the table. He opened his mouth and said, "Xian, what? Do you want to be a shaman?" "I don't want to." Chapter 102. If it were other people in the tribe, they would be thrilled to hear the shaman's words, but the one sitting here was Xiao Xian. The shaman had expected that Xiao Xian would refuse, but he didn't expect it to be so straightforward. The shaman had been looking for a successor for a long time. As the spiritual leader of the tribe, the shaman had to choose the right successor. Therefore, the recent generations of the shaman had spent a lot of effort on the selection of successors. When Gigu was still young, he was chosen by the shaman. The shaman planned to train him from a young age, so he was named Gigu. The name Gigu came from the blessing incantation, "Water returns to its gully." It was obvious that the shaman had high expectations for Gigu. Unfortunately, the shaman was studying some newly found herbs at that time, so he forgot to keep an eye on Gigu. When he came back to his senses, he found that Gigu was already on his way to becoming a warrior, pursuing the peak of power, and never looking back. Gigu respected the shaman as much as the others in the tribe. If anyone said something bad about the shaman, he would fight back. But, since he was young, his biggest goal was to become a powerful warrior. The shaman didn't get angry with Gigu, but he began to reflect. The main idea of the tribe was to become a powerful warrior, and they were very persistent in the pursuit of power. Those who were forced couldn't become a qualified shaman. The successor had to be willing to do so. After Gigu, the shaman began to pay attention to other people in the tribe. Because everyone wanted to become a warrior, the shaman wanted to choose from those who couldn't awaken. If they couldn't awaken, would they be willing to be a shaman wholeheartedly? It didn't matter whether they could awaken their totemic power or not. As long as they met the requirements, they would be able to inherit the power from the shaman. As for the original power, it didn't have much effect after becoming a shaman, because the shaman couldn't go out of the tribe. Nothing could happen to the shaman. No one could guarantee that nothing would happen to him after he left the tribe. Therefore, generally speaking, the shaman of the tribe would not leave the tribe after he took over the responsibilities of the previous shaman. No one in the tribe would let the shaman get involved in danger. If the leader was gone, they could choose another powerful one, but not the shaman. Every shaman would be chosen very early on, and once they were chosen, they would teach them by example. This was a tradition. As for the requirements for the candidates, no one could say for sure. It was completely up to the shaman to decide. Among the generations of shamans, there were men, women, warriors, and people who had never awakened their totemic powers. Therefore, whether or not one could awaken their totemic powers was not the deciding factor. However, after more than 20 years after Gigu, the shaman still couldn't find a suitable candidate. Occasionally, he would go down the mountain to see the other children in the mountain foot district, but every time, he would return disappointed. Until one day, Gigu came with his newborn daughter, and asked the shaman to give her a name. The moment the shaman saw the baby in Gigu's arms, he had another idea. He named the baby Guizhe, which was also derived from the blessing spell. The soil belongs to the house, the water belongs to the ravine, the insects don't work, the grass belongs to the pond. Therefore, from a very young age, Guizhe was trained as the next shaman. At that time, only a few people living on the mountain top knew about it. However, the shaman didn't expect to see Xiao Xian again. Since Xiao Xian awakened, he acted differently from the others. Since then, the shaman really began to pay attention to him. Moreover, after that, many things changed his view of Xiao Xian again and again. If the reason why Xiao Xian improved faster than the others was because of his talent, then what about Xiao Xian's ability to see things that others couldn't, and his ability to recover faster than intermediate totemic warriors? Now he could even see Wu roll. Why did he have such power? In fact, the shaman didn't know, but he believed that it was because of the fire seed. The fire seed in the tribe was incomplete, but since Xiao Xian awakened, it was more like the awakening of a complete fire seed. But at the same time, he had some abilities similar to the shaman's, which allowed him to see things that other warriors couldn't. When the shaman took over, he would pass on his abilities to the next shaman. However, Xueqi didn't get the inheritance, but he already had similar abilities. Could it be that he was the descendant of the previous shaman? It didn't make sense. When the shaman retired, he would pass on his abilities to the next shaman. The shaman wouldn't be so selfish, and his loyalty was unquestionable. Moreover, after flipping through several population registration scrolls, the shaman confirmed that Xian's ancestors were indeed ordinary warriors in the tribe. Until now, the shaman hadn't found the exact answer, but he didn't care about it. He planned to persuade Xueqi to take over the position of shaman, but he didn't expect to be rejected so directly. "You really don't want to?" the shaman asked again, which was rare. Xueqi looked at the shaman, but didn't say anything. He was different from the natives. His thoughts, ideas, principles and so on were all very different. How could he take over the position? But he couldn't say these. Fine. The shaman sighed, and didn't continue with this topic. Instead he asked, "Have you read those animal skin scrolls?" "Yes." "Do you understand?" "Yes." "Xian, do you want to see more Wu roll?" the shaman asked. "Yes." Xueqi was very curious about many things recorded in the Wu roll. At the same time, he guessed that some of the more ancient Wu roll might contain more secrets of the tribe. If he wanted to know more about the tribe, he could only start from the shaman. And the Wu roll was an excellent history book. "I can show you more Wu roll," the shaman said slowly. Xueqi didn't say anything, but waited for the shaman's next words. The shaman raised his head, glanced at the stone table with the herbs, and continued, "I hope you can help Gui Zave." Of course. Even if the shaman didn't say it, Xueqi would teach Gui Zai what he knew. Helping others was also helping himself. The bags of herbs that were given before the hunt were all prepared by Gui Zai. Xueqi was naturally happy to help Gui Zai increase his efficiency. The shaman nodded with satisfaction. After all, he was old and had a lot of things to do. He wanted to teach Gui Zai, but he didn't have the ability. It was impossible for him to teach Gui Zai everything. It was also impossible for him to teach her every method of handling medicinal herbs. Gui Zai's knowledge of medicinal herbs was, in fact, learned from others. For example, if he had time to teach Gui Zai the heart-piercing stem, perhaps Gui Zai would master it faster. But the shaman always thought that maybe when Gui Zai took over the shaman's responsibility, he would inherit the shaman's knowledge and understand the Wu role. What he spent more time teaching Gui Zai was temperament, attitude, worldview, and some things related to the overall situation of the tribe. These were the most important things. And now Xueqi's performance could solve this problem very well. Although it was inevitable that he felt a little regretful, the shaman was still satisfied. After chatting with Xueqi about the herbs on the Wu roll, the shaman got up and was about to leave. Before leaving, the shaman said to Xueqi, "From tomorrow onwards, come to my place in the morning. Some Wu roll can't be brought here. Come to the medicine house in the afternoon." "Okay." Xueqi replied and bowed to the shaman seriously. Gui Zai didn't go back to the medicine house. Xueqi had nothing to do, so he processed all the unprocessed herbs on the stone table. It was only the preliminary processing, so it wasn't difficult. The processing steps of these herbs were all recorded on the Wu roll. These days, he also saw how Gui Zai processed them, so he knew some of the problems that needed to be paid attention to. Like the heart-piercing stem, Gui Zai processed them skillfully. When he left the medicine house and went down the mountain, Xueqi looked up at the sky. Cha-Cha was hovering in the sky above his head. "The world is so big. Do you want to go out and see it with your own eyes?" Xueqi whispered. Soil in its own house, water in its own gully, insects don't work, grass and trees in its own pond. This sentence came from the ancient ballad Wax, which was borrowed here. Chapter 103. The next day, Xueqi came to the shaman's stone house early in the morning. The shaman gave him an animal skin roll that described the methods of collecting and processing 10 kinds of rare animal herbs. Xueqi thought that the shaman would only let him read the Wu roll for herbs, but he didn't expect the shaman to ask, "Have you read it?" "Yes, if I can meet those animals, I am confident that I can get all the herbs." Xueqi answered, "Yes." The shaman didn't comment, and then said to the guard at the door, "If it's not urgent, don't come in." Seeing the shaman's attitude, Xueqi also became serious. It seemed that the shaman had something important to say. Sit here. The shaman pointed to a short table next to him, and then took out an unwritten animal skin roll and a stone plate that contained the shaman's special paint. This array, Xueqi roughly understood what he meant. Do you know how the Wu roll is drawn? The shaman asked. No. Xueqi was a little confused. Wasn't the Wu roll made by the shaman alone? Seeing the confusion in Xueqi's eyes, the shaman said slowly, the power of the totem is not only one kind of power. Body and spirit. Becoming a warrior is the strengthening of the body. The other kind exists in everyone's body, but it's not much. What's the other kind? Xueqi asked. The power of inheritance, the inheritance of spiritual consciousness. The shaman said. Every shaman would inherit a large amount of power from the previous shaman. Since you can understand the Wu roll, I believe that you are different from others. You should have more power of inheritance than others. The shaman said. The power of inheritance. How do you understand it? Xueqi asked. The shaman looked at Xueqi, raised his pine bark-like finger, and pointed at Xueqi's forehead. Ask the totem and you will get the answer. Xueqi closed his eyes and felt the totem in his mind. The two horns were surrounded by dancing flames, and nothing else could be seen. Just as Xueqi was puzzled, the shaman's voice rang in his ears. Look carefully. Xueqi continued to observe the totem, down to the details. Suddenly, Xueqi felt something and looked at the bottom of the flames, at the faint blue flames. There was more than one layer of flames. Xueqi opened his eyes and asked tentatively, Blue? The shaman nodded his head in satisfaction. As for where Xueqi's power of inheritance came from, the shaman didn't know and didn't want to find out. How many? The shaman asked. Xueqi looked at the brush beside him, then looked at the shaman and asked, May I? The shaman handed over a thin brush. In Xueqi's eyes, the brush wasn't exquisite, and it wasn't easy to use. It wasn't as good as a carbonized tree branch. However, it wasn't the right time to find a carbonized tree branch, so he could use this brush to draw a rough picture. Xueqi drew a rough picture of the totem on the empty animal skin roll in front of him. The shaman looked at Xueqi's drawing, and his smile deepened. Not bad, his drawing skills were good, much better than many people in the tribe. However, Wu roll's drawing wasn't just a good drawing. Whether the lines were good or not, it didn't have much to do with Wu roll. Here. Xueqi drew a line on the flames around the horns. This should be the power of inheritance, right? Very good, this is indeed the power of inheritance. The shaman said with satisfaction. The shaman was about to say something else, but Xueqi continued, and here. Here too. Here too. Wait, let me take a closer look. The shaman's words were stuck in his throat. Every time Xueqi drew a line, the shaman's face couldn't help but twitch. As Xueqi drew more and more, the shaman's expression became more and more strange. His eyes were filled with both joy and sadness, and other complicated emotions. If it were someone else, they would have suspected that they were fooled, but the shaman knew that Xueqi was telling the truth. With so much power of inheritance, with such talent, he actually wanted to become a warrior. The shaman couldn't wait to kowtow in front of the fire pit where his ancestors were cremated. Ancestors, tell me, why didn't such a person become a shaman? If it were some hot-tempered shaman in the past, he probably would have chased after Xueqi with his walking stick and beaten him up. Xueqi compared the blue flames on the totem flames in his mind with the ones drawn on the animal skin scroll, then looked up at the shaman and said, That's all. That's all. The shaman gripped his walking stick tightly, feeling all kinds of emotions. In the end, he could only sigh helplessly. Xueqi really didn't think it was a lot. Because, among the flames around the horns, the blue flames did indeed occupy a very small proportion. Xueqi only heard the shaman say that most people didn't have much power of inheritance, but he didn't know what kind of not much the shaman meant, so he drew all of this. If he knew the shaman's standard, he would definitely hold back. The shaman stared at the totem drawing of the power of inheritance on the animal skin scroll and didn't say anything. Just as Xueqi was wondering what was wrong with the shaman said in a slightly heavy tone, Very good, this way it will be easier for you to draw. Xueqi listened attentively to the shaman's explanation of the Wu roll drawing method. The Wu roll drawing is actually the combination of the power of inheritance, the consciousness, and the drawing. The three of them have reached a state of integration. When the viewer was able to use the power of inheritance and become one with the painting that carried the consciousness, they would be able to interact with the consciousness of the painter. If they could control it accurately, the viewer would even be able to feel the emotions and other feelings of the painter. The extent of this interaction is related to the painter's foundation and the viewer's ability. The more profound the painter's foundation, the stronger the viewer's ability, and the clearer the interaction. The shaman explained the theory to Xueqi. If he wanted to draw the Wu roll, he had to understand all of this. When the shaman was almost done, Xueqi also took note of the shaman's words and understood most of it. Only then did he pick up the brush again and start his first Wu roll drawing. For those who were drawing the Wu roll for the first time, they would first practice by copying the Wu roll. This was because when copying the drawings on the Wu roll, there would be a guiding force that would make it easier for the person copying. Xueqi carefully looked at one of the drawings on the Wu roll, then put all of his attention on the animal skin scroll on the table in front of him. The moment before the tip of the brush touched the animal skin scroll, Xueqi had already activated the power of inheritance in his body and started to draw according to the shaman's instructions. At this moment, Xueqi poured all of his power of inheritance and all of his energy into the only point that the tip of the brush touched. He immersed himself in this only goal, and started to slowly move the brush along the guidance of the original Wu roll. After finishing one stroke, Xueqi was already sweating profusely. He had used up almost all of his energy and felt like he was about to collapse. He was breathing heavily. Looking at the animal skin scroll again, it was only a small circle. Lifting his sleeve to wipe his sweat, Xueqi couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Drawing the Wu roll is so difficult. It's only one stroke, and it even looks like a simple circle, but it's so difficult to start from the beginning. It's full of difficulties. Sure enough. Is it because the power of inheritance is not enough? Xueqi thought to himself. If the shaman knew what Xueqi was thinking at this moment, he probably wouldn't be able to stop himself from hitting him with his walking stick. When he first started copying, it was just a small, and he had to pause 3 times in the middle. Xueqi was able to complete it on his first try. Even in the past, not many shamans could do it. Chapter 104. In the past, Xueqi would never believe that he had only drawn one circle in the morning, and he was so tired that he was about to collapse. But now, he personally felt that drawing a circle could be so tiring, and it was even mentally exhausting. When he walked out of the stone house and looked at the surrounding scenery, Xueqi felt that the house in his field of vision seemed to be spinning. He looked up at the sky for a while and felt better. He was no longer dizzy and could stand steadily. Xueqi carried the stone box that the shaman gave him and went to the medicine house to help Xueqi process the herbs. He didn't know what the shaman said to Xueqi, but when Xueqi taught her, she didn't ask too much. She just learned seriously and improved some of the ways to process herbs. Compared to drawing with Wu roll, processing herbs was much easier. When he went down the mountain, Xueqi had recovered from his tiredness. In the stone box that the shaman gave him, there were 2 animal skin scrolls, the shaman's special paint, and a writing brush. The shaman didn't have time to teach Xueqi every day. Most of the time, Xueqi had to practice by himself. The stone box was covered with a grass net, so when Xueqi carried it back, it was still shaking. "What is this?" Old Ku asked when he saw Xueqi come back with a stone box. "It's a task assigned by the shaman." Although the shaman provided materials for Xueqi to practice, he didn't want him to waste them. When he practiced, he had to show them to the shaman. This was also a task assigned by the shaman. When Old Ku heard Xueqi's words, he suddenly felt a sense of awe. He even looked at the stone box with great respect. He didn't dare to look at it. Since Xueqi wanted to draw, he didn't ask any more questions. In his opinion, whatever the shaman did was right and meaningful. "Don't let the shaman down," Old Ku said solemnly. Back in his room, Xueqi took out the animal skin scroll. There were 2 animal skin scrolls in the stone box. One of them had not been scribbled at all, while the other was the one he had practiced this morning. There was even a circle on it. Opening the animal skin roll, Xueqi took out the paints and brushes. After thinking for a while, he took out the charcoal pencil he had made, intending to try it out. However, just as Xueqi was about to activate his power of inheritance, he quickly flicked his wrist and moved the charcoal pencil away. The charcoal pencil broke into many small pieces and scattered on the stone table. If Xueqi hadn't moved away quickly, these scattered pieces would have fallen directly into the animal skin roll. Sure enough, Not every pen used to draw Wu roll was suitable. The brush that the shaman gave Xiao Xian was made of ferocious beast hair and special wood. Giving up on using other brushes, Xiao Xian picked up the one the shaman gave him and continued to draw. Since it was practice, he naturally started with the drawing he had done this morning. With his first attempt, he became more proficient in drawing the second time. He still didn't draw quickly. When Xiao Xian finished drawing the circle, he realized that it was already dark. At least an hour had passed. Compared to the morning, the drawing time was not much shorter. However, this time, Xiao Xian was not as tired as he was in the morning. The dizziness was also not as strong. This was an improvement. For the next few days, Xiao Xian would bring the stone box to the shaman's place in the morning. However, the shaman was busy these days. After Xiao Xian went over, he would sit in a small room in the stone house and practice. If he had any questions, he would ask the shaman when he was free. The shaman didn't even have time to see the results of Xiao Xian's practice. 5 days later, winter officially arrived. The temperature plummeted overnight. When Xiao Xian opened the door in the morning, all he saw was white. In the big bird's nest on the roof, Cha-Cha was stretching its neck to look down. When it saw Xiao Xian come out, it flapped its wings, shook off the snow on its body, and flew up. Cha-Cha slept outside, not because Xiao Xian forced it to. When winter was coming, Cha-Cha had no intention of hiding in the house. Now that it was snowing heavily, it didn't hide either. Since it could withstand this kind of weather, Xiao Xian didn't care. After all, Cha-Cha was not a pet bird in a greenhouse. If it flew to the forest one day, it would also have to endure this kind of weather. It couldn't be pampered. Caesar and Cha-Cha followed Xiao Xian up the mountain. When they were about to reach the top, Caesar went down the mountain by himself, while Cha-Cha flew to other places to look for food. Just by looking at this point, these two were well trained. When Xiao Xian arrived at the stone house, Tar and Gigu, the two team leaders of the hunting group, were already there. Xiao Xian didn't want to disturb them, so he bowed to them and went inside with the stone box. He went to the small room to continue practicing the Wu roll painting. The two team leaders only knew that the shaman was teaching Xiao Xian something about herbs. They felt that Xiao Xian was really a lucky kid. 4 people in the tribe, it was a great honor to be able to learn from the shaman. They would never have guessed what Xiao Xian was really learning. Xiao Xian opened the animal skin roll, but didn't start painting immediately. When he came in, he heard the two team leaders apologizing. In the past year, some of the herbs they found were not what they needed. It was just that many herbs and plants looked similar, so it was not easy to identify them. Even though they had drawn pictures on the animal skin roll, there were still mistakes in what the advance group brought back every time. For example, some of the herbs and plants Gigu brought back from the last hunting trip had to be removed. This was a communication gap. The shaman couldn't tell the warriors in detail what he said. It was just words without a real picture, and without a practical operation, so the communication was greatly reduced. It wasn't their fault. After all, not everyone could understand the Wu roll like Xiao Xian. It would be great if everyone could understand the shaman volumes one day. Thinking of this, Xiao Xian raised his eyes and looked at the stone table in front of him. There was an unfinished Wu roll on the table. Xiao Xian took it and looked at it. The content surprised him. It was about farming, but unfortunately, Xiao Xian couldn't see the picture clearly through these pictures. This was a copy of the ancient scroll. No one knew how many times it had been copied, and the original consciousness of the first painter had been blurred. When copying an ancient scroll, because it wasn't seen with one's own eyes, it was equivalent to reading someone else's description, and then retelling it. The retelling would inevitably add some subjective consciousness. It was like a sentence, passed from one person to another. The meaning wouldn't change much, but after being passed by many people, what would it become in the end? 99% of the time, the original words would be changed. Although some things could be seen from the transcribed version of the ancient scroll, it was not as clear as the original version, but there was an increased sense of fuzziness. Just like the one in front of him, the shaman didn't personally experience farming, so naturally, he couldn't understand the wishes of the original painter. The one that was left behind should be a copy of a previous shaman's copy. Since the shaman left it here, it meant that he didn't mean to hide it from Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian looked at the animal skin scroll for a while. Although it wasn't clear, he could still be sure that the picture drawn was not of any place in the tribe. The Wu roll was more like a plain area, with vast farmland and fertile soil. He couldn't see what was being planted, but he could see some vague figures working in the fields. Unfortunately, the area where the tribe was now was not suitable for farming, and the people in the tribe didn't have the intention to do so. There were some edible plants in the mountains around the training ground, which was enough for the people in the tribe. The shaman didn't know how long he would have to wait to see the scene drawn in the animal skin scroll. He left this copy probably because he wanted Xueqi to look forward to it. For every person in the tribe, that scene was indeed shocking. Unfortunately, even the shaman didn't expect Xueqi to be so special. Putting the animal skin scroll aside, Xueqi continued his practice. Now he wasn't copying the Wu roll, but drawing by himself. What he wanted to draw now was a plant he saw in the green field. After mulling over it for a while, he put down his brush and painstakingly finished the drawing. Looking at the animal skin roll, it was really difficult to connect the runes drawn on the animal skin roll with the plant in the green space. The lines were twisted like earthworms. However, aesthetics were secondary. The most important thing was whether or not he could draw the picture in his sea of consciousness. For Xueqi, he had already succeeded. In his previous life, Xueqi's archaeology classmate once said, "Prehistoric art is the existence of prehistoric ideology, not aesthetic or aesthetic ideology." At that time, Xueqi didn't understand, but now, he seemed to understand a lot. The creator of the Wu roll was just drawing in the real world. With the help of the power of inheritance, he drew his consciousness in the form of drawing. That was all. It had nothing to do with beauty or ugliness. Thinking of this, Xueqi felt a lot better. Looking at the picture he just drew, Xueqi thought, if I showed this to the archaeologists in my previous life, they wouldn't know what I drew. Chapter 105. In the afternoon, when Xueqi left the medicine house, it was still early in the morning. There were not many herbs to be processed, and there was not much work to be done recently, so Xueqi planned to go down the mountain early and practice his Wu roll drawing when he got back. However, after walking for a short while, Xueqi stopped and listened carefully. He lifted his foot and turned towards the direction of the sound. Between the mountainside and the top of the mountain, there was a special place. It was a training ground specially opened by the warriors. However, this training ground was not for the warriors, but for the children on the mountainside and the top of the mountain who had not awakened their totem power. The children on the mountain began to receive training very early, and this was their main training ground. However, the space was limited, and sometimes they had to clear the place for throwing. If there were too many people, they would be easily hurt by the wooden or stone tools thrown out. The children here were all children who had not awakened their totem power, and their abilities were limited. Most of the people who could train here were from the noble families on the mountain. Their elders held important positions in the tribe, and were at least the leaders of the hunting teams. Otherwise, they would not be able to find a place to move around, and would be excluded. Everywhere, there was a competition of fathers. Xueqi had never been there for training before. Later, when he awakened his totem power, he passed by the training ground once when he went down the mountain and just watched from a short distance. It was winter, and snow was falling heavily. In such weather, there were many noises coming from the training ground, and it sounded like there were quite a lot of people there. As he walked towards the training ground, the noises became clearer and clearer. Compared to the foot of the mountain, the main roads were cleared every day in winter, no matter how heavy the snow was. Some of the children who had not awakened their totem power would come out wrapped in thick animal skins. Most of them did not lack food, and the animal skins they wore were of good quality. Even if it was cold, it would not be life-threatening. Following the cleared path, Xueqi came to the kid training ground. There were nearly 100 people in the training ground, from 5 or 6 years old to new warriors who had awakened their totem power for 1 or 2 years. Because they could not withstand the cold like totem warriors, the children in the training ground, who had not awakened their totem power, were all wrapped up like rice dumplings. At this moment, there were 3 children in the middle of the crowd. Xueqi recognized 2 of them. That was Yang Guang from Qiao Mai's family. Yang Guang was the name of these 2 people. Qiao and Mai were twins. Yang was a boy and was born earlier than his sister, Guang. There were very few twins in the tribe. At present, Yang Guang was the only twin in the tribe. It was said that when Yang Guang was born, the shaman went to see him in person. Yang Guang was 1 year younger than Xueqi, and he hadn't awakened his totem power yet. However, both of them had good potential. After the end of this winter, my plan to let them join the preliminary team and send them to the shaman. Many people in the tribe knew that Guang from Chiao Mai's family was born with great strength. She would definitely awaken her totem power in the future, but she was not easy to get along with. Compared to Guang, as the elder brother, Yang was not so outstanding. However, he had a good temper and did not quarrel with others. Every time when Guang fought with others, he would go up and stop them. The two siblings had very different personalities. Of course, this was only the version that was heard. As a person who had a good relationship with Chiao Mai's family, Xiao Xian naturally knew that the real situation was very different from the rumors in the tribe. As the younger sister, Guang was born with great strength. She could fight against two people at once before awakening her totem power. This was a fact. However, it was not true that she was impulsive, irritable, and liked to fight. The tribe treated girls differently from boys. If a boy was punched by a girl, people would say, "Ah, being punched by a girl won't make you lose a piece of meat." But what if it was the other way around? What a bastard! How dare he? Needless to say, the boy's parents would teach him a lesson in person. It was not that there was any gentlemanly behavior here. That was all bullshit. Here, it was because the successive shamans attached great importance to the protection of girls. After all, it was related to the tribe's reproduction and future. The ratio of men to women in the tribe was not equal. Every year, there were fewer girls than boys. For this reason, the successive shamans were worried to death. If there were other tribes nearby, they could just kidnap a girl from outside to be their wife. However, the tribe was almost isolated now. Excluding those who were close to them by blood, there were even fewer people who could be found. Now there were many old bachelors in the tribe. If old Ku had not been injured in the past, he might have already had grandchildren. This was also why every time they walked on the path of glory, the returning young warriors were like peacocks spreading their tails, showing off themselves and their prey. It was precisely because of this difference in treatment in the tribe that every time there was a problem that needed to be solved by force, or if there was someone who was extremely unpleasant to the eye, the one who would charge forward was Guang. As the elder brother, Yang would pull his sister from behind and shout, "Stop fighting. Sorry, Guang is too impulsive," and so on. For example, Guang and Guang were having a dispute with another party. Guang was using both her hands and legs to fight the people in front of her, but her brother Yang was holding her back, so she couldn't kick him several times. However, she also succeeded a few times. Otherwise, how did the footprints on the other side come about? Yang pulled his sister and seemed to be dissuading her. However, when someone from the other side stood up to speak, Guang kicked him. She did not kick him, but she scraped his animal skin clothes. The person who just stood up retreated. Yang really couldn't hold her back? Who was he kidding? These two people's strength was actually about the same. If they really wanted to dissuade her, it was impossible that they couldn't hold her back. Yang Guang was not old, and did not have the honest character of Chiao Mai and his wife. Instead, he was mischievous. The day before, he learned some simple rope traps from Xiao Xian, and the next day, he could go out and trap people. Seeing that there were people on the other side who had awakened their totemic power and were about to stand up, Xiao Xian spoke first, "Guang Guang." The people on the other side all looked over. After seeing Xiao Xian, Guang's originally angry face suddenly turned into a smile. She broke free from her brother's pull and ran towards Xiao Xian. Because she was wearing too much, and even covered with a cloak, she looked like a moving dumpling when she ran over. When Guang saw Xiao Xian, it was as if she had found a backer. She pulled Xiao Xian's arm and said, "Brother Xian, they hit me." The few people who had been kicked by Guang wanted to spit out blood. Bullshit! Bullshit! Anyone with eyes could see who was the victim. When the people on the scene saw Xiao Xian, they all had different expressions. The younger ones were not sensible, and did not care much about Xiao Xian. But the older ones were different, especially those who had awakened their totemic power in the same batch as Xiao Xian. Not to mention that Xiao Xian had made great contributions in the past year, and had joined the advance group. Even now, Xiao Xian was still learning things from the shaman. In their eyes, this was a shining halo. Therefore, even if Xiao Xian could not come over and compete with his father, and was born in the cave, no one dared to ask him to leave. Ku, who was standing behind the crowd, felt even more complicated. He was also from the cave, and at this time last year, he was the most envied person in the cave. But now, when they talked about Xiao Xian, how did it feel? In just 1 year he had changed so much. Chapter 106. After listening to Yang Guang's explanation, Xiao Xian understood the cause and effect of this quarrel. Although in the eyes of many people at the foot of the mountain, a small leader of a hunting group was already very powerful, Qiao Mai's family was not really that powerful here. As far as Xiao Xian knew, there were a lot of kids who had a say in the tribe. Their parents were at least at the level of a small group leader. Not only that, but their grandfather's generation and above had all held important positions in the tribe, such as the chief and hunting team leaders. Some of them even had a few shamans in their ancestors. The accumulated advantages were very obvious, and their status in the tribe was also higher than others. In contrast, Qiao Mai's family was at most a new noble family with no background here. Yang Guang and Xiao Xian rarely came to this training ground since they were born. Usually, they would be taken to the warrior training ground by Qiao Mai and his wife. Many children on the mountain had the same experience. They were protected by someone, so they would not get hurt in the training ground of totem warriors. In winter, Yang Guang did not want to go out in the winter, because he was still young and did not want to go out. Therefore, he did not come to this training ground with others. Yang Guang and Xiao Xian only knew the children of other warriors in Mai's hunting group. They were not familiar with many people on the mountain. However, this winter, Yang Guang and Xiao Xian decided to do some good training, so that they could awaken their totem power by the end of this winter. However, they did not know the situation in the training ground, and the rules here. Since it was a training ground specially for children who had not awakened their totem power, the adults would not interfere. Whether it was the management or the rules here, they were all set by the children who had not awakened their totem power. Even the ancestors were once children, and many of the rules they set were still in use today. And the rule here was, if you want to come here to train? Sure, but you have to hang your name first. The so-called hanging name was to hang the stone card with your name on the tall stone tree next to the training ground. Only after hanging it up, you were qualified to enter the training ground. When Xiao Xian first saw the stone tree beside the training ground, he thought it was a telephone pole. However, when he got closer and touched it with his hand, he realized that it wasn't. It really was a tree. This stone tree had a very long history, perhaps a few hundred years. It was said that it had been here since the training ground was built, but it grew very slowly. It was hard to tell how much it had grown even after more than 10 years. Their ancestors had left this tree behind, and it later became the deciding factor for these children to enter the training grounds. The stone tree was as thick as 2 people and was nearly 50 meters tall. It was thin and long, and only the top part of it had branches. Most of the bottom part was bare. In other seasons, newcomers would climb up the tree and hang their stone card with their name on a branch. Until one day, when they awakened their totemic power and became warriors, they would take down their cards and officially leave the training ground. This was equivalent to a ritual that had been going on for hundreds of years. Normally, this wouldn't be a problem for Yang Guang. Although the stone tree looked like a stone, the surface of the trunk was as rough as bark. It wasn't too difficult for them to climb it. Originally, under special circumstances, they could make an exception. For example, in this kind of weather, it was impossible to climb. However, today's situation was a bit coincidental. Today, 2 groups of people were going to compete. The winner would be able to train in the training ground for the next 20 days, and the loser would have to leave immediately. This kind of competition actually happened every winter, because at this time, many people on the mountain were preparing for the awakening. In order to be in the best condition for the preliminaries before the end of winter, they would try their best to get training time in the training ground. This was the only place on the mountain that was relatively spacious and suitable for throwing and other training. There was a large open space at the foot of the mountain, but unfortunately, they didn't want to go down the mountain. Moreover, this training ground had become a symbol of status. Being able to come here, even if it was just for show, would make them very happy. For example, Ku was brought here last year, but he didn't have a card, so he couldn't enter. He could only watch from the side. Because of this, Ku often bragged to the people at the foot of the mountain. Originally, the training schedule was that everyone would take turns. The first 10 days, one person would use the training ground, and the next 10 days, they would take turns. But at this point, it was a battle of whose fist was harder. For tribesmen, the way to solve problems was naturally to compete. In the tribe, many people thought that it was necessary for children to compete with each other, and they also agreed with this method. No matter which side would use the training ground at this time, everyone's thought was, anyway, we want to train now. Will you give up the place? Or not? Come on, let's fight. If you win, you're right. If you lose, you're wrong. If you're right, you're wrong. In this training ground, fighting for territory had to be decided in such a direct way. Every time this happened, both sides would ask their relatives and friends to help, including the awakened totem warriors. Xiao Xian saw Mao, Mor, and the others. But usually they wouldn't do anything, and just watched from the side. The two sides had different families. They were either from Ta's hunting group, or from Gigu's group. Just at this time, Yang Guang and his sister came over and said they wanted to join. As they were on the same side, Xiao Xian naturally chose to accommodate them. But the other side didn't agree. They used the rules of their ancestors, and didn't want to give up. Yang Guang and his sister couldn't hold back, and kicked someone. The kid who was kicked in the face by Guang just now mocked Yang Guang and his sister. They must be afraid of heights. After learning the whole story, Xiao Xian looked at the stone tree. Different from other trees, there was a thick layer of ice on the surface of the stone tree. It was quite difficult to hang a stone card with one's name on the top of the tree without damaging it. Even for totem warriors, it was not easy to climb up. Xiao Xian looked at Yang Guang and his sister, who were wrapped up like fat rice dumplings, and then looked at the 50-meter-tall tree. Xiao Xian estimated that they would slide down the frozen trunk as soon as they jumped up, not to mention climbing up. Can't we use stone tools? Xiao Xian asked. No. That will damage the stone tree, but we don't restrict the rope. The one who spoke was about the same age as Yang Guang and his sister. He sounded a little arrogant, and there was a sense of gloominess between his eyebrows. After saying that, Meng Guang and Guang Guang smiled sinisterly at them. His expression seemed to be saying, "Aren't you strong? Then throw it." His name is Meng. He is bad. He is the one who doesn't allow us to enter. Yang Guang complained to Xiao Xian. In such weather, with the cold wind and snow, many people who had not yet awakened their power were shivering. Some people thought that since Yang Guang and his sister could not do it, they might as well give up. They still wanted to watch today's competition. It was not a good idea to stand here in the cold. So, what do you want to do now? Xiao Xian looked at Yang Guang and his sister. Both of them looked frustrated. Even if they had a lot of ideas, they could not think of any solution at this time. Actually, we can put this matter aside for now. After we finish the competition, this place will belong to us for the next 20 days. Yang Guang can also train here. Mao walked over and said. Hearing Mao's words, a person behind Meng sneered. You talk as if you are very powerful. Seeing that the two sides were about to quarrel again, Xiao Xian shook his head. The competition between the two sides was one thing, but the qualification to enter the competition was still a hot topic. Actually, it is not difficult, Xiao Xian said. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, the people around who were about to quarrel all turned their heads to look at him. Not difficult? Was he bragging? Not only Meng's people, but also Mao and the others looked at Xiao Xian in confusion. They did not understand why Xiao Xian would say that. Can't we use stone tools? Xiao Xian asked again. No, Meng said. Can't we ask others for help? No. Except for that, we can ask others for help. Yes, that's easy. After saying that, Xiao Xian put his finger into his mouth and blew a whistle in front of hundreds of people. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.